enough, and there was no need for all this modern marketing and social media nonsense. But in 2016, Eccleston agreed to sell his baby to American group Liberty Media. It cost Liberty Media $4.4 billion, and they quickly got to work. We got an F1 app almost immediately, and teams were allowed to show us more from behind the scenes. One of Liberty's most important deals was with Netflix, which in 2019 brought us Drive to Survive. The effect? An almost 70% rise in viewership for races in the US alone. It's massively benefited Formula One online too, with a rise from 7.8 million followers across its social media platforms in 2016 to around 50 million today. New eyes are on the sport too, with F1's own subscription TV channel, which people can watch anywhere in the world. But the main market they've tapped into is the US. There's now 3 races there a year, in Texas, Miami and Las Vegas, and an American-branded team, Cadillac, getting involved in the sport too. More races seems to be the direction of travel. A street circuit in Madrid's being welcomed onto the calendar, while conversations around a Grand Prix in Africa have ramped up in the last few years. More big events could be in the offing too, after the massive F1 75 season launch event in London in 2025. 7.5 million people tuned in to watch it live across the social media channels, and that doesn't include the viewing figures for where it was broadcast on TV in certain countries. It seems Liberty will do whatever they can to grow the F1 brand. Their efforts have been worthwhile too, with Forbes valuing the sport at $17.1 billion back in 2023, almost 4 times more than what they bought it for in 2016. Not bad, considering it's seen as a sport where people just drive around in circles.
You're listening to Trans-Euro Express on talkSPORT. Kevin Hatchard will be alongside Danny Kelly for this one tonight. Plenty to bring you across the show. We're going to be asking what on earth has happened to Joao Felix in his career. He's made a move to the Saudi Pro League, but of course at one stage seen as one of the rising stars of world football. We're also going to be asking whether Erik ten Hag can rebuild Bayer Leverkusen, because of course he is hoping that he can emulate what Xabi Alonso did at the Bayer Arena before he made the move across to Real Madrid. Going to be wrapping up some transfers for you as well. Lots of fuss at the moment about Benjamin Šeško. Is he going to go to Newcastle? Is he going to go to Manchester United? We're going to be digging deep into what all of the fuss is about. Plenty more to come with me and Danny on Trans-Euro Express. But we are going to start by reflecting on the impact on European football of Heung-min Son, because Son has confirmed that he is leaving Tottenham after an extraordinary spell in North London. He's going to be going to MLS to join LAFC, and it's tempting to purely focus on what he's done in the Premier League and beyond for Tottenham, because of course he's been an incredible servant for them, well over 300 league appearances, so many goals for the club. But of course before then he made a massive impact in German football as well. And I think what was really interesting about Heung-min Son from the get-go actually was his willingness to make an impact, his willingness to learn German as quickly as he could, his willingness to integrate and really get involved with his other teammates. And he arrived at the Hamburg Academy when he was just 16. And this was a guy that had a few injury problems originally, but once he broke into the team, scored in his debut, was a very, very exciting talent. And what you saw in those early days in northern Germany was what we knew we would see later on for a big club in the Premier League, because he was explosive, he scored goals from range, he was a brilliant finisher, and he affected the game on a regular basis. He scored an early double against Borussia Dortmund away from home, and those trademark long-range drives that we would see in the Premier League time and time again for Tottenham, we saw that for Hamburg, and he got the move to Bayer Leverkusen. I remember seeing him score a hat-trick in the space of about 10 minutes for Bayer Leverkusen in a game they ended up losing, actually, 5-4. But he was a phenomenal goal scorer, and he never allowed his head to drop. And it was no big surprise when a big Premier League club came calling. And it's not just about the goals, it's not just about the assists, it's not just about that incredible partnership that he was able to have with Harry Kane. But I think about the man that he is, not only seen as a nice guy, and there are so many people within football that will pay testament to that, but a great teammate, a determined leader, which is what he became at Tottenham. But in terms of the technical quality, the speed, the ability to play multiple positions, the finishing, I mean, you look at his performance above expected goals, I think since 2014, it's right up there with Lionel Messi. It might actually even be better than Messi. But for him to be in that kind of company shows you the kind of technical finisher that he was. And he scored so many goals from range. But I think when we saw his long-term partnership with Harry Kane as well, what we were able to see with Heung-min Son was his ability as a facilitator. And that's a rare thing to find, that it's not just about ego, it's about somebody who's willing to be a quality teammate. And that partnership that he had with Kane was one of the top partnerships in world football. It was admired across Europe. There were clubs that would have loved to have signed Son, I'm sure, in that time. But he stayed with Tottenham. And he's going to leave on an incredible high. The role that he played in the end in that Europa League run, the fact that Tottenham were able to deliver a trophy for the first time in such a long time, I think testament to his durability, his longevity, and the perfect way for him to go out. And it's not just about what he's delivered for Spurs. Spurs fans, of course, will reflect on an incredible spell that he had and the joy that he gave them year in, year out. But think about what he's done for South Korea. 134 caps, 51 goals. This is a guy that has contributed to them qualifying for the World Cup time and time and time again. That's an incredibly tough thing to do when you think of the miles that he's had to put in. But time and time again, he shows up for South Korea. So to have juggled the club career with the international career over that period of time is really quite something. LAFC are going to part with a fair chunk of cash to bring him to MLS. And I think he's got every chance of making a big impact there. If you look at what the likes of Luis Suarez have been able to do, obviously he's not going to have Lionel Messi alongside him, but he's going to be able, I think, in MLS to show what he's capable of on a regular basis. The physical demands are not going to be the same. I think he's going to have quality teammates there. Of course, he's already got that link with Hugo Lloris, who's going to be able to help him out as well. And I think he is going to be an incredible signing for them, for MLS as a whole. And I think he's still got a lot to give. This is somebody who I know by Premier League standards at 33 was maybe starting to slow down a bit. But I think he's shown over the course of his time in Germany with Spurs, but also with that South Korean national team, he has shown that he's somebody that can perform at the highest level time and time again. And that's a very rare thing to find. And what's quite interesting as well is that you often hear about the Bundesliga tax. You often hear about whether players can come from Germany and continue to perform in England, and there's a lot of examples held up of players that haven't quite done that. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking about Jadon Sancho. But Heung-min Son is somebody who absolutely was able to make that transition, came so close to reaching the Champions League final, should have got to the Champions League final, rather, in 2019. Tottenham will feel they had a great chance of winning that, but of course lost to Liverpool in that final. But he was part of that incredible run that included that comeback against an Ajax team that had been absolutely incredible all the way through. So I think Heung-min Son, even though he's leaving Tottenham, even though he's leaving European football, which I'm quite sad about, considering he's been an incredible player, I think he leaves such a positive impression on every club that he's been at. And I think that tells you about the player, but about the man himself. And I think there is a very, very strong argument to make that he is the greatest Asian player of all time. I put that up on social media earlier in the week when it became clear that he was moving on from Tottenham, and a few names were thrown around, the likes of Keisuke Honda, the likes of Hidetoshi Nakata. But this is a guy, for his longevity at an elite level, I think absolutely deserves to be judged as the greatest Asian player of all time. I'm sure we'll mention him later in the show as well. I know Danny certainly wants to pay homage to Son for what he's done for Tottenham. We're going to be talking about plenty of transfers, by the way, on Trans Euro Express later in the show. Some really intriguing players that we're going to be focusing on, the likes of Benjamin Šeško. If you don't know much about him, RB Leipzig striker, a lot of people saying, is he good enough for Newcastle and Manchester United to seemingly be having this tug of war over him? We're going to be talking about whether he's going to have a really big impact potentially in the Premier League. His teammate Xavi Simons at RB Leipzig, he's being linked with Chelsea. We're going to be talking about his potential quality in the Premier League as well. And potentially a new teammate for him, Joao Felix. He's made the move from Ajax to Chelsea. So we'll talk about the impact that Joao Felix could have at Chelsea. I happen to think he's going to be somebody who'll fit well into that Chelsea squad because he's versatile, he can cover numerous positions, and for a player of his very young age, he's somebody that I think can make a big impact. We've got plenty to come on Trans Euro Express with Kevin Hatchard and Danny Kelly. You are listening on talkSPORT. listening to Trans-Euro Express on talkSPORT. Kevin Hatchard taking you through some of the big stories in Europe this week. We're going to be delving into a few transfers over the next few hours, myself and Danny Kelly, and we're going to focus on Italy for the next few minutes. And Ademola Lookman, who is a player who has done incredibly well for Atalanta in recent years. You might remember he scored a hat-trick for Atalanta against Bayer Leverkusen in the Europa League final. He's written himself into Italian football folklore and certainly Atalanta's club history, but he wants to leave the club this summer and he's handed in a transfer request. Not only has he done that, but he's actually made quite an impassioned statement on social media. He said, over the past 3 years in Bergamo, I've given everything as a person and as a player. I've always tried to repay the love of the fans, even when things haven't been easy behind the scenes. But now it's time to move on. The club said they would accept offers at a certain level. They're now blocking me for reasons I don't understand. So I've handed in a transfer request and I am truly sorry. What's interesting about this is that he's been linked with a move from Atalanta before. He was linked with a move to Paris Saint-Germain. That didn't work out. He'd had moments behind the scenes where he had fallen out with Gianpiero Gasperini, the former Atalanta coach who's now gone to Roma. There was a stage where Gasperini was very publicly critical of Lookman after he'd missed a penalty. He described him as one of the worst penalty takers he'd ever seen. And it was that kind of clash that characterised the later part of his time at Atalanta. Now it's Inter who want to sign him. And it's believed that Inter and Atalanta are not too far away in terms of the overall valuation to bring him to Milan. But this is a messy end to his time in Bergamo, and it's a little bit of a shame. There are a few cynics suggesting that this is Lookman just trying to force Atalanta's hand and maybe try and force the price down. I happen to think that it is quite heartfelt. I think if you look at Lookman's time in Bergamo, he's always tried really, really hard to forge a good bond with the fans, and I think that's what he's trying to protect in this instance. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Lookman. Does he go to Inter? And if he does, what does that mean for their forward line? Because they've got plenty of attacking options there already for the new coach, Christian Kivu, to make best use of. So is there going to be a departure from Inter? We will see. One of the moves that has gone through that I think is really exciting potentially is Dan Ndoye to Nottingham Forest. That's been signed and sealed. And I think Dan Ndoye is going to be perfect for the way that Nuno plays at Nottingham Forest. If you haven't seen him before, he's played for Bologna for the last few seasons, and he's helped them not only qualify for the Champions League, which they did a couple of seasons ago, but also win the Coppa Italia. And that's what they did last season. That was their first trophy in decades. They beat Milan in the final. And if you look at the way that Ndoye took the goal in the final, that just gives you a glimpse into what he's capable of. It was a crowded penalty area. He showed incredible poise, incredible skill. He kept the chance alive. He moved past a couple of defenders in the penalty area and absolutely slammed the shot into the back of the net. It was a fantastic goal from him. He is a winger. He can play either on the left or on the right. He is quick. He's strong. He carries the ball incredibly well. And that's where I think he's going to really fit in for Nuno and Forest. Because if you look at the way that they've played, they got the best out of Ilanga. They've done that with Hudson-Odoi as well at times. Ilanga, of course, has gone to Newcastle. So Dan Ndoye is ostensibly his replacement. Does he get lots of goals and lots of assists? At the moment, no. Last season, he got 8 goals and 4 assists in Serie A. That was a big jump from what he'd done before. But this feels to me like a player who's getting better all the time. He got some Champions League experience last season. Bologna did struggle at that level, and that's no surprise because they had half the team dismantled and they lost their coach, Thiago Motta, to Juventus. Vincenzo Italiano eventually won the Coppa Italia, so after a bad start, got glory at the end of it. And I think as well, if you look at what Ndoye's done at international level with Switzerland, he's starting to really improve. He scored against Germany in the Euros, the host nation, and that was his first international goal. And I think this is a player who's at the stage of his career where he's probably ready for the Premier League. He's probably ready to really develop under Nuno. And I think Forest have got themselves a really good signing there. So I think that's definitely one to watch and one for Forest fans to be excited about. Says a lot as well that Napoli were really strongly linked with him, and there was quite a bit of interest from Italian clubs. So I think Dan and Doy could do really well at Nottingham Forest. Staying on the Napoli theme in terms of players, they have finally signed off the sale of Victor Osimhen to Galatasaray. Now, I think Napoli were expecting a bidding war that never happened. Nobody ever got really close to what was an enormous release clause for him. Osimhen turned down a move to Saudi Arabia. And if you look at what he did at Galatasaray, he did phenomenally well on loan. He scored 37 goals in all competitions. He was top scorer in the Turkish Super League. Galatasaray won the title. So he did everything he could do. And yet Premier League clubs haven't been convinced to go that extra mile and try and bring him in. And I find that very, very confusing, I have to say. If you look at when Napoli won that first title under Luciano Spalletti, yes, Kvaratskhelia was brilliant, but Osimhen was the battering ram. He was absolutely phenomenal in attack. He's proved he can do it at that level. He scored goals in the Champions League as well. So I know the wages were really high. I know there was a lot of finance involved. But considering how many Premier League clubs are now looking to sign a striker, it's really quite extraordinary that they haven't decided to make that move for Victor Osimhen. Galatasaray have had a bit of help, of course, from sponsors. It's not an easy deal to do. But where I would commend them is the work that they have done in terms of making him feel wanted. And that's not always something that he felt at Napoli, but Galatasaray from the get-go, from the moment he arrived on loan, I think have done an incredible job. And delighted to say that Danny Kelly is with me. And Danny, just talking about Victor Osimhen and what a curious situation it is, really, that Osimhen has scored goals, has done so well, and yet Premier League clubs have not been convinced to commit the finance to trying to sign him.
Well, we talked about this during the meeting beforehand, Kevin. First of all, apologies for my late arrival. As you can see, I'm wearing a bright red shirt. I've now got a bright red head as well from racing from one part of the building to another with the help of the beloved Mrs. Kelly. The Osimhen thing is amazing, isn't it? Because we're now prepared, it seems, to spend £60 million on potential, but any player that's already established, their value is now completely creaky. We don't know if you compare it to the Wirtz. I know you think Wirtz is the best player in the world, but if we compare, no, seriously. But if you compare it to the Wirtz deal, it doesn't make any sense. But that's where we are now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really curious one because you're quite right. There's talk of Šeško and lots of money going in towards him, and I like him very much. But he doesn't have anywhere near the track record that Osimhen has. Doesn't have the grounding that Osimhen has, and this is what's curious. This is a guy that scores in the Champions League. He scores in Serie A. And, you know, Napoli didn't always treat him particularly well, and they've had a running theme there in not really valuing their players when they're in the building. And he's gone to Galatasaray and done exactly what everybody expected him to do, which was to dominate that league. So I think it shows a couple of things. I think it does show that reticence for Premier League clubs to spend a lot on proven talent that they can't then resell. I think it also shows the financial might of Galatasaray, and obviously some of that's external with sponsorship help, but it's a phenomenal signing for them. And there's something quite heartening as well about Osimhen, actually, and I know he's getting massive wages, don't get me wrong, but there's something quite heartening about Osimhen saying, do you know what? They really want me. The fans actually really want me to stay, and the club has done everything it can to make me feel wanted and make me feel like the star player.
It is, and it's also, I think, Kevin, we have to accept that just as we're seeing more players going to the United States for proper transfer fees, just as we're seeing Brazilian clubs gear up for whatever's going to come in the Americas, the Turkish league now has to be taken seriously, certainly their top 3 or 4 clubs, in the European transfer market, because a mixture of the wages they're allowed to pay because of the tax arrangements in Turkey and the fact that they are getting increased sponsorship means that they are no longer just picking up cast-offs and bad boys.
Yeah, I think this is a real klaxon, really, for others. I think people will look at it and think, okay, well, Osimhen's gone there at the top of his game. He's won a title. He's absolutely loved. by the Galatasaray fans. And if he can do it and make a real success of it, that's absolutely an option for me. So, you know, partially it's about the money, and you're absolutely right. But I think to see Osimhen having the time of his life as well doesn't do the Turkish Super League any harm.
Yeah, now that I'm caught up, even if my lighting, for those of you watching on television, making me look like I'm in a horror film, forgive me for that. These things happen. I suspect that it's nothing to do with the brilliant systems we have here at talkSPORT. I think my computer may have, the thing at the back that you push the thing into may have given up the ghost. The last one I'll talk to you about, though, is a real good start for Evan Ferguson. 6 goals in 3 appearances, albeit in friendlies for Roma. This would be brilliant if it could work out for Roma, it could work out for Gasperini, it could work out for Evan, it could work out for the Republic of Ireland, and it could work out for Brighton as well. Yeah,
I think this could be a real success all round. And as you say, he's been scoring freely in pre-season. And the thing that I was thinking about was the job that Gianpiero Gasperini has done with other strikers in his career. You know, you think of what he did for Duvan Zapata at Atalanta, Luis Muriel as well, you know, guys like Retegui, Lookman hasn't always seen eye to eye with Ademola Lookman, but Lookman's played his best football under him. There's no doubts about that.
Definitely.
Rasmus Højlund as well. I know Manchester United fans will say, well, hang on, we haven't seen any of that, but he did very well for Atalanta before that. And Ferguson's made such an impact that there's even talk in Italian media of Artem Dovbyk, who's the guy that he'll be competing with really for a starting spot. Even talk about Dovbyk potentially being moved on to make room for strengthening other parts of the team. So
that seems a bit bizarre to me because, and I'm no doctor, but Evans'
yes,
fitness record is not the most encouraging, is it, at this stage?
I think it may be a bit of overexcitement based on what Ferguson has been doing, but I think it's going to be a really nice problem for Gasperini to have if Dovbyk stays. So, yeah, I think it's really positive because a couple of years ago, I thought Ferguson was one of the best young strikers I'd seen. I mean, he was phenomenal, but as you say, the injury problems have really taken him off the rails.
Absolutely. Kevin, listen, first of all, thank you again. I don't want to keep on about it for holding the fort there. The bit I really wanted to do, the tribute to Son Heung-min, you did it better than I could ever have done. So thank you very much indeed for that. We're back on track here on Trans Europe Express. We always were. Just now you've got the added power of me. Coming up next, we'll be turning our attention to everything that's going on in France, including the loft at PSG. Yeah, welcome back to Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. He's Kevin Hatchard. You can't help but have noticed that in the last little while. Let's turn our... no, I keep saying let's turn our attention. Let's look at everything that's been going on in France. Now, last week, Kevin, we got the bones of this dispute, if you like, or transfer business involving the great Donnarumma at Paris Saint-Germain. And now it looks like that's moved forward because Chevalier, who is the reserve French goalkeeper, is coming from Lille. So that takes us to, obviously they're going to divest themselves of the services of Donnarumma, despite how brilliant he was in the latter stages of the Champions League last season. And why has there been no queue of clubs from the Premier League and elsewhere queuing up for Gianluigi's services?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of strands to this. I think the first is that his wages are a stumbling block, and I think that's partially why he hasn't been able to agree a new deal with Paris and why they've pushed on with signing Lucas Chevalier. But I think also some see Donnarumma as quite an old-fashioned goalkeeper in the sense that fantastic shot stopper, and we saw that throughout the Champions League run. But is he great with his feet? No, and we've seen that quite often. And also, for quite a big man, he has problems, I think, commanding his penalty area as well. I think coming through traffic sometimes, even though he actually did improve it a little bit in the Champions League, I thought, he can be a liability at defending set plays. So I think there are doubts over his overall game. Now, that on some levels seems absurd, doesn't it? Because he's 26, he's played 74 times for Italy, he's won the Euros, and he was a big, big part in them winning the Euros, and he's just won the Champions League. But I think it shows you the ruthlessness, not only of Paris, but of Luis Enrique, potentially, because they look at Chevalier, think that he's a better all-round goalkeeper in the long term, and then Donnarumma moves on. So I'll be fascinated to see what level of interest in the Premier League there is in him.
I guess the obvious place where they've got doubts about their goalkeeper and vast amounts of money is Manchester United.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of move, even though they're not in Europe, I think maybe Donnarumma would be tempted by that because there is a project there. And as I say, there aren't that many options for him. He was linked with Chelsea. Everybody's linked with Chelsea, but he was linked with Chelsea. But to be honest, if they didn't want to commit the finance to sign Mike Maignan, I can't see why they're going to spend even more on Donnarumma, because Maignan, I think, would have been a transformational signing for them. I think he would have been a massive upgrade on Sanchez. But what about the Club World Cup? He's not good enough to be title-winning number one, I don't think, in the long run. And so, you know, not just in terms of a goalkeeper, but a leader. And that's what they lack. And I think Maignan coming in would have really helped them. So if they weren't willing to do that, I can't see them going for Donnarumma. It seems to me, genuinely, they see Mike Penders as the number one in the medium term. Now, he's got a short track record, but I've spoken to goalkeeper scouts who absolutely rave about Penders. There were so many European clubs who wanted to sign him, didn't, and he's going to Strasbourg now, and we'll see how he does. But I think Chelsea are betting on him in the medium term.
Okay, so this summer we've been introduced to the idea of lofts, like a pigeon loft, where clubs park all the players they're trying to get rid of. Now, I asked my colleagues at talkSPORT to prepare a pigeon loft sound effect for me, but they said that was beyond the financial muscle of Trans Europe Express. So when you start talking about the loft at PSG, I will bring you the sound effects that I've been practicing all week. So tell us about who's in the loft at Paris Saint-Germain.
Okay, so we're going to start with Rondal Colomouani. That is tremendous. I do like that very much.
You thought I was just going to go coo-coo, didn't you?
I did, and I've been pleasantly surprised. It's as if there's a pigeon in here with me.
A very large pigeon, yeah.
Yes. So Rondal Colomouani would like to join Juventus permanently. He had a good loan spell there, but Damien Comolli is playing hardball. He He doesn't want Juventus to have to pay that much up front. So they're still toing and froing about the shape of that deal. There has been Premier League interest in him before, and I'm sure that would show up again if this Juventus thing falls through. They've got guys like Nordi Mukiele, who was playing in the Champions League for Leverkusen last season, but that fell through. They didn't want to sign him permanently. Carlos Soler didn't exactly light up West Ham, so he could be off back to Spain. The interesting one to me is Marco Asensio.
Yeah.
Because he was fantastic for Villa, and we thought he was going to Fenerbahce, but that hasn't been wrapped up yet. And so I just wonder if Villa, I know PSR is an issue, but if Villa could find some wriggle room, I wonder if that's a move late in the window they might be tempted to make again and try and bring him back in on loan.
Okay, let's move on then to Marseille. Of course, we'll be covering some of the more important results from the qualifiers for the 3 European trophies a little later in this edition of Trans-Europe Express. But Aubameyang is back at Marseille and has indeed played in a European tie for them.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is that he left to go to Al-Qadsiya and he played well for them. He scored goals and he's come back. And I think there's a feeling that he's just as potentially good as he was when he left. And he's in good shape. And I think there's real excitement about this. So he came on as a sub for their game against Sevilla, which was a friendly. And he got an incredible reception. And Roberto De Zerbi, who's not always the happiest man, he kind of oscillates between joyful and not so joyful.
Yeah.
Seems to be in a really good mood. You know, he talked about how it really hurt the club when Aubameyang left and they're delighted to have him back. He's talked about the transfer business they've done. He's excited about CJ Egan-Riley. He thinks he can do really well this season. Facundo Medina he's really happy about. He's got a lot of experience in Liga. He thinks he can be a real leader for them. Angel Gomez is playing in midfield. So they've done a lot of good work. And he must be happy, De Zerbi, because he's even being nice about Mason Greenwood, because he criticised him heavily throughout last season for his application and his work rate. But he talked about his increasing maturity in terms of his performances. So I think in general, he's happy. The real eye-catcher for me in the business they've done is Igor Paixão, because...
Okay, that was going to be my next question, because I think the because that you just started there, forgive me for jumping in.
No.
It's because Premier League clubs were interested in him, and usually that only goes one way. That's
right. Leeds United were very strongly linked with him. And this is a guy who was arguably the best player in the Eredivisie last season. He was outstanding. He was brilliant in the Champions League for Feyenoord and scores, really outstanding goals, spectacular goals, but also does contribute on a regular basis. He's not just an inconsistent guy who only turns up every few weeks. And so that really shows Marseille heading in the right direction and kind of tooling up for the Champions League. And Pierre-Emile Højbjerg talked about this. He said that the squad feels ready, and he said the fact they got a massive crowd for this pre-season friendly shows the kind of excitement there is around the place. So maybe they're heading in the right direction, and I think Liga needs them to be, because the worry for me, and the worry I think for everyone in France, is that PSG, yes, will represent the country brilliantly in the Champions League and on the world stage, but domestically there's no one that can get anywhere near them, and Marseille have got the best opportunity to do that. I know Monaco have made some good signings, but Liga needs a strong Marseille.
But Kevin, let's be truthful, that bateau has already sailed, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
It's just about... what we have seen is when PSG do lose a bit of focus, Lille were able to win the league. Now, that does feel like a freak event.
An outlier, yes.
But they need to be... It's similar to Bayern in Germany, and this is the thing that I've wrestled with year after year after year, that balance between... Do you want a super club that represents the country and the league well on the global stage and the European stage, or do you want a competitive league? And at the moment, they've got the former and not the latter.
The last thing I want to talk to you about, and last week we talked about Lyon. Of course, we talk about Lyon every week and their ever more Byzantine business activities. And we talked about the fact that they were hiring lawyers to try and get out of a relatively small transfer fee, 7 or 8 million, for Matt Turner, the veteran goalkeeper. And yet now I see them spending 15 million on Liverpool Academy graduate Tyler Morton. good player. But they've obviously decided they can afford young players, I guess, because they can sell them on. Whereas Matt Turner is a different story.
Yeah, I think in the long run, that's what they're going to have to do. And Tyler Morton does feel like somebody who, in the long run, could bring them significant profit. It looks as though he's going to join them from Liverpool for £15 million, which, you know, considering the club was nearly administratively relegated recently, you know, any kind of significant outlay raises eyebrows. But I think he's somebody that, you know, it was clear that he wasn't going to get in the Liverpool team on a regular basis. You look at the sheer quality they have, the depth they have. Leverkusen were very keen on him a year ago, would have quite liked to have done that deal, but Arne Slot, it's believed, put the kibosh on that and said, I want him to stay, we need the depth. But he didn't end up playing much. Paulo Fonseca's talked about him, the Lyon coach. He says, a player I like a lot, midfielder with great passing quality, comfortable in small spaces. He's got the kind of characteristics that will fit our game. So I think he's ready for this move, and Lyon will give him a good platform, I think.
You probably wouldn't know this yet because it probably hasn't been revealed. Is there a buyback clause for Liverpool as a matter of interest?
I must admit, that wouldn't surprise me, but I must admit, don't know for definite that that's the case.
Yeah, because I know he's hugely rated at Liverpool, and if you look at the kind of players Liverpool have been tending to bring through in the last 5 or 6 years, when I hear that, my ears tend to prick up because they know of what they talk. I'll be very interested to see how he gets on and whether indeed he starts playing immediately for Lyon. Though, as you say, clubs in Lyon's particular position probably don't end up spending £15 million on bench warmers. At least that's what I would think about that. Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. Next here, we've got an interesting story. We're going to be joined, we're sticking with France, we're going to be joined by Eric Bielderman, one of our French football correspondents, to talk about Strasbourg. Strasbourg, as you know, have a very, very close relationship with Chelsea, and we'll be asking him, because the protests were so enormous when this deal was put together, whether Strasbourg fans are still absolutely furious about being seen as a feeder club for the West London Giants, or whether they're seeing the benefits of getting some of Chelsea's better players, better young players, certainly expensively acquired players and very well paid players to play for Strasbourg itself. Eric Bielderman is next here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, welcome back to Trans-Europe Express. Now, the bones of this next story that we want to discuss in detail, and Kevin will jump in, of course, I think he knows even more about it than me, is that in 2023, Blueco, the holding group that owns Chelsea ultimately, also bought Strasbourg in France. There were lots of complaints from Strasbourg supporters that they were becoming a feeder club, and a lot of players have since been at one club and then the other. To talk about this and how Strasbourg fans continue to feel about it, I'm delighted to say we're joined by our French football expert, Eric Bilderman. Hello, Eric.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Really, really good and great to see you, my friend. So, as I said, in 2023, when Chelsea's owners acquired Blueco, there was a great deal of unrest among Strasbourg fans that they would become just a kind of parking slot or a feeder club for Chelsea, who are, of course, I have to say, a much bigger football club. How is that? Is that still the case? Are Strasbourg's fans still upset about it, or do they see some benefits now?
Fans is about versatility. So, of course, there are still some suspicion about the benefit of the deal on a long-term basis. But as last season, Strasbourg has a great season, and we're competing for the Champions League qualification till the last 3 games in the French Premier League. So the fans, they were really happy about it. And they are now qualified for the Conference League playoff. So that's something which is quite unusual for Strasbourg. So on a short-term basis, at the moment, I think the limelight of the result of Strasbourg is shadowing the in-depth situation, I would say.
Eric, do you think Liam Rosenior has helped build that bridge? Because he's a coach that not only is very good tactically, but seems to have a real bond with his players and seems to be very, very good at just managing relationships. Do you think he's made this whole thing a bit more palatable for the fans?
I do believe it's so, because as you mentioned, he's an English manager. I think he knows something about Chelsea, about the English Premier League, the attitude, and he brought to Strasbourg something not only as a manager, but as you say, a bridge between the Alsatian culture of football and the English culture of football, and to bring something about what we do expect from Chelsea, to choose the players that Chelsea is ready to give on loan. And also, Liam Rosenior can also give his appointment. And what he said recently, he says, I'm the man who decide to say yes or no when I have an offer from Chelsea to have one player on loan. So I'm still in a certain extent, the boss of the dressing room, the boss of Strasbourg, and not only just the man on the bridge.
And Eric and Kevin, can you tell us about some of the players that Chelsea have sent to Strasbourg who helped them so much last season? As you say, Eric, they were in the running for a Champions League place right to the last 2 weeks of the season. Who are the players who have caught your eye that are actually Chelsea footballers?
If you talk to me, sorry, I was not sure the question was to me. I would be more likely to talk about what's coming next, because the glamorous situation at the moment is that Chelsea have given the opportunity to have Kendry Pace.
Wow!
It is so-called the Ecuadorian Messi. He's 18 years old. And we are looking at him like a kind of a god of football, or a god to be in football. He is training with Strasbourg in the last 3 months, and that's something what we really look forward, because we know that the French league at the moment is losing most of their players, more than having players to arrive in the French Premier League. And Strasbourg is I would say, a counter-example. They have spent £70 million so far this season. They have sold only £40 million of players. It's something which is, when you forget about Paris Saint-Germain and Monaco, Strasbourg is very, very aggressive with the huge help of Chelsea on the transfer market. I could give you a list of promising players, and mainly some from English Premier League, one from Brighton, for example, Valentin Barco. We don't know about him, but we do believe it. Rosenio says we must have this player. It means something.
Eric, it's really interesting what you say there about across Liga. If you look outside of Monaco, who are obviously making some signings, Marseille have done some business as well. Yeah. Paris always have that cash. But we know what the TV deal situation is. We know how difficult it's been since the Media Pro deal fell apart. Yeah. So I just wonder, actually, whether other clubs are going to look at what's happening with Strasbourg and think that might be our only way to actually be competitive, to maybe look for some kind of... Not everybody's going to get Chelsea, of course, but... Can we hook up with a Premier League club? Can we hook up with a La Liga club? Do you think we'll see more of this in Liga?
Of course, it's one of the expectation that we can have in the future for French club, but this is not the only one. Look at Lyon. It's a dark example, but it could be also a bright example. They have been bought by Eagles group, the one we are owning Crystal Palace. So at the moment is a bit in jeopardy, but we know that we can have American, which is at the moment, I would say the majority of the situation, American shareholders or American fonds pension, I don't know how to say that in English, they do put their money in French club. Toulouse at the moment is under also such a situation, and many clubs are at the moment in that. But if a club like Liverpool, a club like Newcastle, a club, I would say, with a huge number of players available can come and be a sister club or a mother club too, because you can't be sister when you are a big one and the small one, but a mother club to some French, of course, we will go for it.
Eric, all this is against the background of the ongoing financial difficulties that French clubs have found themselves in because the television deals haven't worked out as well as, say, the television deals that the Premier League and the Spanish clubs have done. What's the latest on that? What is, because that is, to most European leagues, until the clubs or the league start streaming their own content, the television deals are the biggest source of income. Where are we with that in France now?
TV deal is a nightmare. We have lost Canal Plus years ago due to the will of the French league, who was believing that they were having signed a £1 billion deal with Media Pro. Then they signed with Amazon. Then they signed with DAZN, DAZN, and all this deal were not working, not only financially with lower offer, but also the lack of subscribers. And the very last one, we might have had only 200,000 full payment subscribers with the DAZN, and most of the other one, they were going or to forget about the French football or to go with for free with ghost channels. So the situation at the moment is that whatever will happen, only way to see the French league next season is to go through the league, the French Premier League TV network, which is at the moment to be created. The average price, nobody wants to pay for the French league, so Canal Plus is the big one. Canal Plus is Sky Sports. Canal Plus have been so much at war with the French league 3 years ago that they don't want to go in the deal. beIN Sport is having one game per week, and the other game will be on the league TV. So all that money, it's around 200 to 400 million pounds instead of the billion which was expected. So most of the French clubs, they have made their strategy, expected 3 years ago, 2 years ago, to have 800 or a billion. So when they went to pay the wages for the players to go to sign deal. Now they have even less than 50% of the money they were expected to have.
Eric, just briefly, for me, the saddest thing about all of this, with the exception of Paris Saint-Germain, is that France, who are the world champions at football, let's not forget that, they can't hold on to their young players. They have to, as soon as they show any talent at all, they're off to England, they're off to Spain, they're off to Italy, they're off to Holland, wherever. It's really sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but I would say, to be positive, it's when after 1998 is when all our players went abroad that we really kept the world-class level on the national team. European champion 2000, world champion 2018, final in 2006, final in 2022. This is unique in the French football, and this is part of the gift that to play abroad to Real Madrid, Barcelona, or to Arsenal, Man United have given credit to the French football. We are a second-class football country in terms of power and clubs, but we are a first-class football power in terms of building grassroots football.
Oh no, the production line of young French footballers is just an amazing thing. And of course, because I'm old enough to remember when French football just kind of bobbled along. And occasionally you'd get one great French footballer and you'd hear about him. But now, every team in Europe has 3 great French players. Listen, Eric, it's been we needed somebody on the ground to give us this story about Strasbourg and where the French League is going. Thank you very much indeed. Eric Bilderman there, joining us on talkSPORT. In the next hour, we've got a lot to get through, including Mbappe Watch, everything that's going on in Spain and Germany. And we've got a very good team focus for you. You don't need me to tell you, because Kevin Hatchard is on. It'll be a German club. You're listening, and thank you for bearing with at the start when it was my end that was not going well, to talkSPORT and particularly to Trans-Europe Express.
The Ryder Cup. Unique, euphoric, unanimously loved. Here's the history and some of the key numbers behind the contest that grips the world of golf and beyond like no other. The first edition was held in 1927, where a Great Britain team arrived by boat to play in Massachusetts at the Worcester Country Club. Originally, the competition comprised of 4 foursomes and 8 singles, with 4 balls not introduced until 1963. In the first 22 editions, when it was just Brits and Irish against the US, America only lost 3. So, in 1979, in came the rest of Europe, including the future 5-time Ryder Cup winner, Seve Ballesteros. Since Team Europe was established, the head-to-head reads Europe 13, USA 9. Home advantage is a big deal. Europe's last away win was the miracle at Medina in 2012, and America hasn't won on European soil since '93 at the Belfry. It's accepted that both teams tailor their home courses to suit their own players. For example, in Paris in 2018, Thomas Bjorn asked for the rough to be kept extra long beyond the green to target the big booming American drives. 10 years earlier, Paul Azinger did the opposite and the Valhalla rough was trimmed right down. On both occasions, the home side were resounding winners. So what about the money? The most recent Ryder Cup in Rome drew in a record 271,000 spectators and boosted the Italian economy by €262 million. In the US, the PGA America TV deal with NBC is worth $440 million. But no Ryder Cup revenue has ever gone directly to individual players. That's until now. In 2025, for the first time ever, the US team will each receive a fee for playing in New York. Of course, in Rome, legend has it Patrick Cantley refused to wear his cap because he wasn't being paid to wear it, though he insisted it simply didn't fit. Either way, Team Europe have made it clear they're more than happy to keep playing for the sheer thrill, joy and prestige of the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, welcome back everybody to the second hour of 3 of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. Let me take a deep breath and reset the show after Kevin Hatchard so valiantly started at the top of the previous hour. I'm Danny Kelly. Kevin Hatchard is here with us tonight. We're very, very lucky to have him along for the ride. And we've still got 2 hours, absolutely packed show for you about European football and football beyond there as well. Let me just tell you, in the next hour, among the things you'll be hearing, a review of everything that's going on in Spain, including the latest on the great goalkeeper Ter Stegen at Barcelona and what he's up to and why they're trying, I think, very much to get him out of the club. He's not been put in the loft yet. We'll be talking about Germany. Spurs have just confirmed the signing of Joao Felix. Kevin will tell us why it didn't work out for him at Bayern Munich. And of course, we'll get the latest on Benjamin Šeško as well. And then at 10:45, we'll have a team focus on Bayer Leverkusen. So powerful just 2 years ago, they were able to win the title ahead of Bayern Munich, but now gradually stripped of many of their great stars, including even players like Granit Xhaka, who's gone to Sunderland. All of that's coming up in the next hour here on Trans Europe Express, where now it's time for this.
Carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, shoots out! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
Yes, Kevin, it's time for Mbappe watch. And there's no club who likes to push the rules to suit themselves more than Real Madrid. So they enjoyed the summer in the United States when they were in the Club World Cup. But then they got back and said, we were in the Club World Cup. We made millions and millions and tens of millions of pounds, but now it's upset our pre-season training slightly, and we would like to delay our opening game of the La Liga season against Osasuna. Only they in Barcelona would have the brass neck to do this, of course, but it hasn't worked out yet.
No, it hasn't. And no club brings out the world's tiniest violins more than Real Madrid. No, the Spanish Football Federation judge has said that you can't delay the game any further. Now, they'd already had a bit of grace from La Liga because their game against Osasuna is going to be on the Tuesday. It's going to be the Tuesday after the weekend of the first set of games. So it's going to be the 19th of August. Now, their argument was they didn't stop playing in the Club World Cup until July the 9th. There are some people who might argue, looking at that semi-final against PSG, they stopped playing a few days before that. But the judge said, look, the necessary 21 days of rest are in place. There are no grounds to further postpone the game. Now, of course, they're not going to get a proper pre-season. But what they will do is they'll go to Innsbruck the week before. They're going to play the Austrian side, VSG Tirol. So a kind of low-key friendly, as low-key as a Real Madrid game can be. But they are going to get a few minutes in the legs there. But I think this is going to be the fascinating thing, I think, over the course of the first few months of the season. How are Chelsea going to look in the first few months? How are Real Madrid going to look? How are PSG going to look? Because we're not going to know whether it's actually ended up being a kind of hyper pre-season that's really sharpened these teams up, or whether it's driven them into the ground. Probably not going to know that until November, maybe December, when we've had a couple of Champions League games. We've had a really tough period of the season. So Real Madrid at the moment are not getting that their own way, and I'm really fascinated by them because I watched Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen very, very closely for a couple of years. I was really quite... I mean, everybody in Germany was amazed by that season where they won an unbeaten league and cup double because it was such a leap. It had never been done before by that football club. It had never been done by anybody to win an unbeaten Bundesliga title. So it was phenomenal, and I'm really fascinated to see how he will shape that raw material that he has, because I think some of the signings they've made are really exciting. Dean Howson, I think, is going to be a Spain and Real Madrid centre-back for the next 10, 12 years. I think he's a phenomenal young player. And I think, you know, lots of Premier League clubs wanted him, but as soon as he had the chance to go to Real Madrid, he went.
Here's a tricky question for you. Who was making the other look better, Dean Howson or Zabani at Bournemouth?
Well, it's a really interesting question, that, actually. But I think, actually, Howson is the one I would choose, right? Howson I would choose over Zabani, who I do like and is going, it seems, to Paris Saint-Germain. I think it says a lot, not only for Bournemouth, but for Andoni Iraola, actually, that his two starting centre-backs, one of them's off to PSG, one of them's gone to Real Madrid, and the left-back's gone to Liverpool. So I think that tells you a lot. I think he's a brilliant signing for them, and that's where they had all the problems, right, at the back. Valverde, I think, is going to be great for Alonso in midfield. I think he's going to be phenomenal. Tchouameni's going to have a really important role, whether it's in a back three, starting build-up, or whether it's getting further forward in midfield. Arda Güler in deeper midfield, I like the look of that already. But the question's going to be, can you get Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. to do the pressing? Well, and that's what drove Ancelotti to distraction.
Absolutely. There's a couple of other things as well. I mean, I note that Jude Bellingham is out for 6 weeks. Excuse me. And last year, particularly at the back, they suffered multiple injuries, Real Madrid. So in the end, you end up with Valverde and Tchouameni playing in defence.
Yeah.
They have rearranged their medical department, or to put it more in the vernacular of the public house, they've sacked some of the doctors. Now, we've seen exactly the same thing happen at Tottenham, where the medical department has come under scrutiny. But, you know, the Club World Cup is a good example. Part of this is to do with the fact that Real Madrid just play so much football, and that they're expecting their players to play high-level football 48 weeks of the year. And sooner or later, something has to give, and that seems to be where it's gone. Tell me about the remainder of the squad. Compared to Leverkusen, they've got great players, Real Madrid, obviously. Have they got players that suit what Xabi Alonso wants to do, or will he have to curb his enthusiasm, if you like, and play in a way that more suits their players? Of course, they've also got the doubt currently about whether Rodrigo will still be there.
Yeah, so What I wonder is whether Rodrigo will be sold to facilitate bringing one or two more in, because he seems to have decided, Xabi Alonso, that Rodrigo's not for him. I think he's an outstanding player that would grace any club, but he has very specific requirements, Xabi Alonso. We've seen that time and time again. If you look at some of the bigger games against Bayern, for example, sometimes he left both Schick and Boniface out completely, and he would play guys like Nathan Teller or Amin Adli because he wanted a certain thing without the ball, which is just as important as with the ball, which is why I'm fascinated to see how Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. slot into his system. But I think Alvaro Carreras is a brilliant signing, really attack-minded left wing back. I think he's going to slot in brilliantly there. I think on the right hand side there'll be loads of talk about Trent. Is he going to fit in? Is he going to be effective? I think he's perfect for what Xabi Alonso wants, because I think of what Alex Grimaldo did from left wing back for Leverkusen. So what he would do was he would invert, he would come into midfield and he would pull the strings from there, but also you'd find him crossing to the other wing back, who was often Jeremy Frimpong, and those two would link up. We've already seen that start to happen with Trent Alexander-Arnold. So I think the system is perfect for him. I think it's just going to be about the depth. It's going to be about how do you keep everybody happy and how do you get the depth, because if they can sort that out, I think they'll be right up there challenging with Barcelona again. But I still think they've got a bit to do in the transfer market just to give him that depth that he will want.
Yeah, and I think Rodrigo's availability, if that's indeed what is the case, he is partially a victim of the arrival of Trent Alexander-Arnold, because with Valverde and Trent on the right-hand side, do you actually need another right-sided forward? And probably the answer is not. So much creativity over there that if you could cash in on him and add to what they have in midfield, where, you know, we're still waiting for Camavinga and Tchouaméni to show that they're Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. That is a big task, isn't it? Plus Bellingham, of course, is there. So there's still a lot to go there. But what I'm really interested in here, Kevin, I know if Andy was here, of course, he would be going nuts about the fact that we're going to have a question. We're having a question about basketball without Andy being here.
I feel ashamed that I'm going to talk about basketball without him on the show. It's
well, you know, if you will take your family on holiday, this is the kind of thing that happens, isn't it?
Exactly.
Kevin, Real Madrid never at the back of the queue for activity outside the leagues that already pay their wages, shall we say it no more strongly than that, are very much encouraging an NBA European extension that would completely alter, not to say destroy, the current setup of European basketball. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Real Madrid might actually be involved in a European Super League that works, it would seem, because they've met with the NBA Commissioner, Adam Silver. Now, Silver's been going around speaking to people in all kinds of European cities to try and get interest and commitments to the NBA's proposed new European League. Now, they want to have a franchise in London, they want to have one in Paris, they want to have one in Madrid. This is a serious plan, but what's really interesting about this is it would disrupt the existing EuroLeague, which is enormous, by the way, the EuroLeague. I mean, you look at the top games, you look at the crowds. I mean, the potential is phenomenal, but you know, if that gets off the ground, this NBA Europe, then that is going to cause a real stir. And
would there be a British franchise, Kevin?
London is definitely on the list, and I think there have been talks. London Lions are, have had some financial difficulties and are back on track now. But yeah, I think there is very much a push for that. So Real Madrid want to be a part of that in some way, shape or form, and it appears that they're having those conversations right now. So it'd be really interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, of course, Spain much more into its basketball than perhaps it's a really cult sport in Britain, and those clubs have got some of them have got really long traditions as well. But if the Spanish and the Latvian countries and Greece, people like that get after it, then we could see. Yeah, it's huge in some of those countries. Absolutely right. We'll stay with Spain next, where we'll move beyond Real Madrid, and we'll talk about Barcelona and Atletico Madrid and one or two other things. But it's Barcelona we'll be looking at next, because they continue to wrestle with the demons of their financial past and all the lever pulling. Yeah, don't forget, breakfast returns tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. with Jeff Stelling and Andy Townsend. They'll be joined by a host of guests, including former England cricketer Graham Swan and also Manchester United and England defender Rio Ferdinand, who joins the guys in the studio. So that's breakfast with Jeff Stelling and Andy Townsend from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. So, Kevin, we're back to Spain now, having got through Real Madrid, and back to another club that just never quite... Well, we always have to talk about them because they're always up to something. Let's talk about Barcelona now. Andy gave us the bones of the story last week involving Marc-Andre ter Stegen, arguably one of the best three goalkeepers in the world. Not arguably, actually one of the best three goalkeepers in the world. How Barcelona have brought in Juan Garcia to be the new number one, have renewed Szczesny's contract as the number two, and therefore want Marc-Andre to move on. This story, and then they were furious because he said he's going to be out for 3 months, which means they can't put him on the injured reserve, so to speak, because he is hurt at the moment. Joan Laporta, the guy who runs the madhouse at Barcelona, has had something to say about this week to move the story on.
Yeah, he has. He's talked about Joao Garcia and how they're going to register him. Now, he was asked, does it depend on ter Stegen leaving? And he said it doesn't, but ter Stegen being sold would be the quickest route to get Joao Garcia registered. And here is the issue, because, as you've said, it's quite obvious that ter Stegen doesn't realistically have a future with Barcelona. To believe that Hansi Flick, the coach, has told him that. It's being, made quite plain by Barcelona that they don't see him as being involved in the long term. But there have been a couple of players who've spoken publicly for him. Pau Cubarsí, the young defender. Gavi has described him as, a legend of the club. And, at least one of the La Liga titles they won was largely down to him. But he's in a real pickle now because he is injured for the next 3 months at least. And Julian Nagelsmann, the Germany coach, who rates him very, very highly, has said, look, I see him as our number one for the World Cup if we get there next year. However, he has to play. Now, he's willing to wait, I think, for ter Stegen. But when we get to January, this is going to have to be resolved. Because the truth is, nobody's going to buy him now. Nobody's going to buy him if he's not going to be back for 3 months. But this is going to come to a head in January. And I think this idea that ter Stegen has of somehow being the Barca number one in January, it just isn't going to happen. Because they wouldn't have given Szczesny a new deal, and they wouldn't have brought in Joao Garcia as the long-term number one. But I think more widely, it just reminds us where they're at as a football club. Because they've won La Liga, yes. They've won the Copa del Rey, brilliant. Won the Spanish Super Cup, all very well. All this stuff's great. But they're still wrestling with an enormous amount of debt.
Let me come back to that, Kevin, if I may. So there's one other question that I want to ask about ter Stegen. You will thank me for saying that Germany's national side, the Mannschaft, is starting to improve at just the right time. They're rounding into form in time for the World Cup in America, which is now, 11 months away? Ter Stegen will want to be part of that. Germany will want him. What are they making of his situation? I'm sure Julian Nagelsmann's had something to say.
Yeah, well, as I say, he's made it clear that he has to be playing. He wants him to be his number one. He's been unequivocal about that. And you have to remember how long ter Stegen's waited for this, because he was stuck behind Manuel Neuer for years and years and years. And that caused a bit of friction between him and Hansi Flick, because Flick kept Manuel Neuer instead of giving ter Stegen his opportunity. And ter Stegen was very angry about that. So they have that history. So I don't think ter Stegen will allow this kind of pride to stand in his way come January. I think there's going to have to be a solution found, because he's too good a goalkeeper to miss a World Cup because of this. It is thought that the sporting director, Deco, is going to have another meeting with him in the coming days to try and resolve the situation. But with him injured, I mean, you just can't see how that's going to get resolved this month.
We will get onto Atletico Madrid in a minute, but then, as you were hinting at there, this takes us to the wider picture. It's now 2 years since the infamous lever pulling when Barcelona mortgaged their future media rights, image rights, etc., in order to keep on competing as they see it, not just with Real Madrid, but with the superpowers of the Premier League. And of course, in some ways, they're proven right. When the 17th best team in the Premier League can win the Europa League, it must just look extraordinary to the rest of the continent. Why are they still having these registration issues? Why haven't they sorted this out? It's been 2 years.
Yeah, and you look at the Dani Olmo situation where there had to be intervention from, higher authorities to keep Dani Olmo playing for the club. There are all kinds of legal wrangles about that. Pau Victor as well. And you look at the Nico Williams situation. Nico Williams was a long-term target of Barcelona's. He was ready to make the move from Athletic Club. Why did it fall over? Well, it fell over because his agent is believed to have said, well, we want a clause in there that if you can't register him, he's able to walk away. And Barcelona didn't want that, and the deal collapsed. So these things are still in the background. Marcus Rashford's not been registered yet, and he was asked about that, and he said it's something for the club to resolve. I trust that they will. All I'm focusing on is being ready for the start of the season. But it's a big issue. And the thing that's confusing, Danny, is that Jules Koundé, who's been excellent for them, and Frenkie de Jong, who really we should have linked with Manchester United about 17 times already on the show by now, because that's the annual tradition.
Yeah.
They've said publicly they've agreed contract extensions that they're about to sign. So what are they? Are they reorganisations? Are they deferring payments to later? What's the nature of those? How are they affording that? So it's a very curious situation at the moment. And the stadium, that's still been rumbling on. The costs of that are believed to have ballooned. So there's a lot still to do.
Then let's take us quickly to Atletico Madrid. Saul, who's on his way out, of course, or has already left, you'll tell me. Having not heard a word from him for 15 years, he's suddenly got plenty to say about everything, and we'll hear more from him later on. But he's kind of put the pressure on his old club, on Atletico, by saying with the amount of money they've spent this summer, and I think it's somewhere near 200 million euros now, they will get some of it back. I suspect people like Conor Gallagher might not be there forever. He said they not only will they, but they should be competing for the title.
Yeah, and I think he's right. He's given quite a wide-ranging and really interesting interview, actually. And he has left the club. He was on loan at Sevilla. He's gone to Flamengo now in Brazil.
Of course he has, yes.
So be interested to see how he'll do there. But he said last summer they spent 200 million. They're doing it again this summer. They have to compete for everything. And you look at the players they've signed. Johnny Cardoso came in from Betis. He was linked with Tottenham and other Premier League clubs. Matteo Ruggeri's a really good fullback. He's gone there from Atalanta. David Hansko looked as though he was going to Saudi, but he's gone there from Feyenoord. Thiago Almada from Botafogo. That's a brilliant signing. Brilliant signing. You made the point before we came on air, actually, Danny, and I think you're absolutely right. If he can hook up with Alvarez like he does for Argentina, that's going to be huge for them. And then Alex Baena is a big money signing from Villarreal. So last season wasn't bad. They were in the mix for things. They were in the mix for La Liga for a while. They were so close to knocking out Real Madrid in the Champions League. They collapsed against Barcelona in the Copa del Rey. So they were in there, but it's about time they started winning things. And I think that pressure is now on.
They've started to divest themselves of players they've had there for years and years. Thomas Lemar is a good example. He's gone to Girona. But they, having spent the amount they have, I presume that there will be outgoings. Do you think Conor Gallagher is likely to be one of those?
Not necessarily. I think they've already moved some players out. So Rodrigo de Paul's gone to Inter Miami, and that might seem a bit weird to some people, but there's such a strong group of Argentinian players and the coach there, of course, and he's worked so well with Messi before. And obviously he's got that click back as well at Inter Miami, so he's gone there. Angel Correa's gone to Tigres. Rodrigo Riquelme's been moved to Betis. Samuel Lino's gone back to Brazil, to Flamengo for big money. So they have done a few deals. They've got some players off the wage bill that brought some money in. And what we do know about Conor Gallagher is that he's a player that Diego Simeone very much likes and appreciates the qualities that he brings to the team. So I would think there's still scope there for him to compete for his place.
Okay, listen, thank you very much indeed for all of that. We're cutting Spain a little bit shorter than usual because we're moving on to Germany next. Kevin, of course, makes his living commentating on studying German football. There's a load of great stories, including huge transfer stories involving Spurs, Liverpool, Manchester United, Newcastle, maybe Chelsea as well. And that's what we'll do next here on Trans Europe Express.
$10K for Coldplay.
Yeah, right. Time is running out now for you to enter our huge prize draw to win 10 grand and a VP night out at Coldplay at Wembley Stadium. That's right, we're giving you the chance to win 6 tickets and a private box for you and your mates on August the 22nd with full hospitality. And we're chucking in that 10 grand spending money completely tax-free. Now, it all ends tomorrow night, so here's how to enter. It's 18 plus and it's the UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338 by the 4th of August at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or you can post your name and number to Coldplay Competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 7th of August. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's are available for you at talksport.com. So, Kevin, time for you to do your party piece and talk to me about Germany.
It won't be as strong as your pigeon, I have to say. Your pigeon's kind of stolen the show. That's the greatest party piece of the year, I would say.
Yes, I think, I set out to learn the pidgin language. I'm not an expert yet. I only speak pidgin. Kevin, let's talk to me about some of these big names going into and out of German football. Of course, with my Spurs hat, and I want to know about Joao Felix, announced by Spurs that he is on a year's loan now from Bayern Munich. Now, a really specialist player, a proper defensive midfielder, a destroyer, you might say, in the old world. What are Spurs getting here? Are they getting a solution to one of their problems, or are they getting a busted flush? Because it hasn't worked for him at Bayern Munich, has it?
I think they are getting an old-school destroyer, because if you look at his time at Sporting, if you look at his time at Fulham, he was a destructive player. He was somebody who sensed danger, was able to snuff it out, somebody that allows maybe more technically gifted players ahead of him a platform on which to perform. Now, the issue there really is that Bayern never needed him. Thomas Tuchel, when he was there, made this big song and dance about needing a number 6. I need a specialist defensive midfielder. Joao Kimmich isn't that. Leon Goretzka isn't that. So he made this big push for Joao Felix. They tried to sign him to the point where Felix was even doing like photo shoots and all this, and then the deal fell through right at the end. And by the time Felix went to Bayern, Tuchel wasn't there anymore. And so then he was left trying to convince Vincent Kompany that there was a place in his team, and there just wasn't, because Joao Kimmich was rehabilitated, if you like, reinvigorated by Kompany, who said, I'm going to make this guy my main guy in midfield. Kimmich, I think, started the first 35 games, something like that, in all competitions. He played every minute of every game. So that was one of the 2 places taken.
And then Goretzka found his form again.
Exactly that. So at the start of the summer, Uli Hoeneß, the honorary president, who thankfully actually is right as rain now after a health scare over the weekend.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Nasty shock, but glad that he's on the mends. That's good. But he had said it's probably best that Leon Goretzka thinks about finding another club. And if Uli Hoeneß is saying that, then that's basically the club saying that. But Goretzka just turned around and said, no, I'm going to train, I'm going to push, I'm going to do everything I can. I've got a contract, I don't want to go, I'm going to keep on going. And he did. And to be fair to him, he got his place back in the team, and he offered more than Felix going forward. He offered, a drive forward from midfield. And then he got Alexander Pavlovic, this young defensive midfielder who's not defensive in the way that Felix is. He's not a tackling machine. So I feel a bit sorry for Felix, because he is what he is. And I think in the Premier League, you need that kind of player sometimes. And I think Tottenham can really get a lot out of him. I don't see him as somebody who's really faded. I don't see him as somebody who's necessarily really declined. I think he's going to be fine. Bayern just simply didn't need him. He wasn't their type of player.
Yeah, and you could argue he's had a year off to refresh his batteries.
Exactly.
Luis Diaz has made his debut.
He has, for Bayern, 2-1 friendly win over Lyon. Came on as a sub, nearly scored immediately, won a penalty, looked really good. And what was interesting was that Bayern kept trying to find him, kept trying to get him into positions where he could do damage. So I think there's quite a lot of excitement about him coming in. And the thing you always think of is, right, they've spent this money on this player. Does he get in their first 11? 100% he does. Because if everybody was fit at Bayern, their front four would be terrifying, because it'd be Kane with Musiala behind him, Olise in off the right, Luis Diaz in off the left. That is the ultimate front four. Now, they're not going to have that for a bit, because Musiala's injured. He got a really nasty injury at the Club World Cup. So he's going to be out for a couple of months at least, maybe more. And the player they need is a 10. Now, they've been linked with Nick Woltemade, who could play 9 or 10. He's a young player at Stuttgart. I think a modern Peter Crouch, that kind of player.
And he can play 10?
He can play 10, yeah, he can. I think he's best as a 9, but because he's got a real awareness of what's around him and he can actually slalom past players and play in tight spaces, he can play in that position. But I think the Luis Diaz thing was something that Bayern really wanted and needed, because they needed a win. And partially that was Liverpool's fault in the first place, because they got Florian Wirtz ahead of them, and Bayern have had that money burning a hole in their pocket for quite some time. So they get the marquee signing they want. Diaz gets the pay rise and the recognition he wants, and Liverpool get a profit that they can then reinvest perhaps in a Newcastle striker, if I'm not being too mischievous. So, yeah, I think it's one of those transfers that could work for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Valtemada, who is like 6'6", 6'7", and can play 10. Of course, it's not a secret that Kane has the vision and the passing to play 10. If they did get him in, they could easily swap those around.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably, knowing Harry, he wants to be the out-and-out centre forward. But there'll come a time when he'll drop back one place, and he'll still be a brilliant footballer. Right, we've all agreed that since we only have one striker per club these days, they are very valuable properties indeed. Benjamin Šeško is the latest one, who is apparently got to be worth 70 or 80 million. Make up your own figure. Is he actually worth that, Kevin? Is he any good?
Well, look, a player's only ever worth what some of the club is prepared to pay.
That's not a proper answer to my question.
No, that's the start. No, but I do believe that. I genuinely always think when we're like comparing transfer to transfer and talking about values, it depends on so many things. How long's the player got in his contract? How desperate are a club to sign him, etc., etc. What I will say about him is I think either Manchester United or Newcastle would be paying for potential. However, he has got double figures in back-to-back seasons in the Bundesliga. And he is somebody that has played Champions League football. He's played a lot at international level with Slovenia. And I think his profile is so unusual that I can totally see why clubs are after him.
What do you mean by that?
So, he's tall, but he's quick. He strikes the ball, he's the classic right foot like a traction engine guy. I mean, he's Roy of the Rovers, hotshot Hamish, you name it, absolutely slams the ball. Now, he's also got some really nice touches. That everything is there. He just needs a few ragged edges smoothed off. But I think a good coach can do that for him, but he's going to have to play. Now, I think he's got the personality to deal with it. I think he's going to have to deal with the physicality and the pace of the Premier League, but I think he can do that.
It looks like, yeah.
Yeah, I think he can. He can tidy up his link play a little bit, but I like him. I think he's a good finisher. As I say, strikes the ball beautifully. He's naturally good in the air because he's so tall. There is a lot to like, and I can see why there's interest, and I can also see that everything is coming up Leipzig, because Leipzig went into this summer knowing they'd missed Europe. They're not in financial difficulty by any stretch, but they were like, okay, the two we need to sell at the top of the market if we can are Xavi, who Chelsea are very interested in, and Šeško. And the fact you've got two clubs in Newcastle and Manchester United who are believed are really interested, that could play into Leipzig's hands very much.
Which takes us to a player who, if we were making up terrible TV game shows, he'd been one called the Unsellables. What about Xavi Simons? I know there's still a few weeks of the transfer window to go. In fact, there's more than that. But his profile is so brilliant. What he's done with Holland is excellent at times as well, and yet nobody seems to be able to extricate him from his hell in Germany. I know he cost an awful lot of money, and maybe there's a problem there. But what next for Xavi Simons?
I think he'll go to Chelsea. I think that seems to be the way the wind's blowing, and he's a player they've been linked.
Oh, good, because they haven't got any. They haven't got any players.
Yeah, they really like Chelsea, so I'm really glad that they've found a way. I think that's the move he'll make. He has been a player that has been very good for Leipzig in general. He scores goals, he makes goals. He's always trying to affect the game. He's a real puzzle, Xavi, because I like watching him play. I like what he brings to a game. He's got really silky skills. He has a great awareness of what's around him. He scored some lovely goals. There's loads to like about him. And this might be really unfair, but the debate in Germany, rightly or wrongly, and I genuinely don't know because you hear rumours around clubs and what have you, but it'd be unfair for me to say that I know because I don't. But the debate in Germany has been, is he a team player? Does he have attitude problems? All of that. Now, that might be paper talk. That might be just media noise, and it just isn't true because there are some coaches that speak up for him. But there are also coaches that have alluded to, he could be more of a team player, his attitude could be different, etc. what I'm fascinated by is if he does go to Chelsea, how does he deal with not being the main man? Because he won't be, because Cole Palmer's the main man.
Plays in Cole Palmer's position, yeah, of course.
So he's not going to be the main man. They might play him off the left because he naturally gravitates to the left anyway. But I'm just fascinated to see how he deals with it, because it's not a work rate thing. The work rate's there because you don't play for Leipzig if you don't work without the ball. It's not that. It's just these rumours, and they might be totally unfair, but they are quite persistent. So if he's going to get to that elite level, that next level, then you need all of it, and those rumours might have to go away.
Yeah, well, clearly when he's got the ball at his feet, he's an exceptional player.
Yes.
You're right. And of course, it's that exact player, technically gifted, that often draws the eye of coaches. It's almost like a built-in prejudice. Are they doing enough in the rest of the game? As you say, you don't get to play for RB Leipzig unless you're putting a shift in. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens. I think the big problem there, Kevin, is simply the amount of money they paid for him. Very un-Leipzig-like in some ways. And now they're going to have a little bit of a problem shifting him on, if that's what they want to do. Next up, we're going to have a team focus. And of course, the team we're choosing comes from the Bundesliga, because why would we waste Kevin's talents and knowledge pool? We're going to talk about Bayer Leverkusen, champions of Germany just over 13 months ago, now gradually shorn of the great players who made that team tick. And we'll talk about what next for Bayer Leverkusen. You're listening to Trans Europe Express, and on these Sunday nights, I know you could be doing so much better things. There's many things you could be doing. We're so glad to have you along for the ride. Stick with us here on talkSPORT. Yeah, welcome back to Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. Kevin Hatchard is here with me as well. And it's because of his expertise that today's team focus moves on to Bayer Leverkusen. Now, I think it's an amazing story, isn't it? As Kevin alluded to a little while ago, Bayer not only won the Bundesliga the season before last, but they did it unbeaten, unprecedented, even for all those great Bayern Munich sides over the years. Erik ten Hag is there now. And the great team that they put together previously is gradually being dismantled. Just for the top of the story, Granit Xhaka has just joined Sunderland. Jonathan Tah has gone. Florian Wirtz has joined Liverpool for a quite astronomical fee. Frimpong has also gone to Liverpool. So, Kevin, a deep breath. What has Erik ten Hag got in front of him? Can they rebuild us another challenging side? And is he the right person for the job, I guess?
I think that's the fascinating thing, that latter point, because I think he gets more respect in Germany than he does in the UK. Even though he won trophies at Manchester United, I think the way it ended, I think some of his awkward media exchanges, some of his decisions, the tactical side of it, which he had been so good at Ajax, but rather fell apart at United. I think overall it's perceived very negatively, his time at Old Trafford. Whereas in Germany, they look at what he did over the border with Ajax, they look at what he did when he was the second team coach at Bayern, and he has a good rep. And before he went to Leverkusen, he'd been linked with the Dortmund job before Niko Kovac got it. So, you know, his stock is fairly high in Germany. However, he's not made the best of starts. And what I mean by that is that he got involved in the narrative around Granit Xhaka, because days before Xhaka went to Sunderland, he said, "The agent can say anything. The club's already lost important players. We will not let any more go. That's not possible. That would neglect the structure and also the culture of the squad. Granit's a leader. He's got 3 years left on his contract. He's too important for us to let him go." And then Xhaka went. Yeah. And I just don't understand what the upside was in him making that statement, because, you know, if Xhaka stays, okay, fine, but he's there under sufferance and not very happy about it. But it was clear that he was not on the same page as Simon Rolfes, the sporting director, because Rolfes signed off on that deal days later. So that was an odd thing to do. And also tactically, there's an issue here, because Ten Hag has used a back four for most of his coaching career. And Simon Rolfes has come out publicly and said that the squad is set for a back three, and it would be good to play in that system. So a couple of kind of friction points there. In terms of what they have some quality still. Jarell Quansah is a really great pickup from Liverpool, and I think is seen as the next Tar in terms of his role in the team. Malik Tillman, who was on the books of Rangers at one stage, was on the books of Bayern. He was signed from PSV. He's a really interesting pickup. He's not Wirtz, but he's going to kind of play in that attacking midfield role. Ibrahim Amaz is great. Now, not many people will have heard of him.
No.
But he's a guy who has been at Hertha Berlin, and I think there's a lot of talent there and a lot of personality in the way he plays. I think he could be great. But they've gone young. They've signed a lot of young players who are unproven. So I think it's going to be about what they get out of the guys that were already there. Nketiah, Tapsoba, Grimaldo, Robert Andrich, Patrick Schick. If they can get the maximum out of those guys to help those kids through, then I think top four has to be the aim. I think a title push is just out of the question for me.
I'll come back to their title chances in a second. They're in the Champions League as well. So given the quality they have divested themselves of, Xhaka, Tar, Wirtz, Frimpong, others from the previous season, are they in any way, any decent shape to make significant progress in the Champions League, or is that not their priority this season?
No, I think it will be. I think they had an encouraging season last term, and I think they will want to push on. They will want to try and... I mean, they were so devastated by what happened against Bayern in the Champions League last season, because they'd looked really good. Apart from that collapse at Anfield, they'd looked really good in the league phase. And then they just had a total meltdown in Munich. Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong, and the tie was lost. So I think they were upset by that, and that contributed to further bad results down the line. But they'll feel that they can go at the Champions League and at least reach the knockout phase again. But I think the league, it's just going to take too long for them to hit the ground running. The thing to remember, when Xabi Alonso took over, it took him a few months, because he took over a team that was actually in a relegation battle, bizarrely, and he managed to get them to 6th, and they did well. But it wasn't until the following season they really started to kick on. So if they could get top 4, have a decent run in the Champions League, maybe have a good swing at winning the Pokal, for me, that's a good season for them.
Okay, Kevin, which takes us to, you've got 3 or 4 minutes for the top of the hour here on Trans-Europe Express. Just give us the runners and riders. Look, we'll expect Bayern Munich to win the title by I'm going to say double figures of points. Behind them is always a great scrap. I know you want more competition right at the top.
Yeah.
But even so, you've got some fantastic clubs. Leipzig Leverkusen will be among those. Who are the other runners and riders?
Well, I think the problem we've got is the problem we always seem to have, and why Leverkusen was such an outlier when they had that run that they did, because Eintracht Frankfurt have just sold Ekitike to Liverpool, who I think is going to be an excellent signing for Liverpool. Really mobile striker, really unusual striker, but really kind of cerebral, interesting player.
Got a great goal at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the Europa League.
He did.
But notably was completely marked out of the game in the second leg. So, he's young. There's still got to learn.
There's still a lot to do. Marmouche a few months before had gone. So they're flush with cash, Eintracht, but they've got to find a way of getting a competitive team. So they've got gaps to fill. Leipzig are the same. They're trying to part company with Xavi and Šeško for top money. They've signed Johan Bakayoko from PSV, but they've got work to do.
They've not got the distraction of the Champions League.
Exactly that. So I think with them, it's going to be about getting back in that top four, because for them not to qualify for Europe at all last season was a disaster, and their worst ever season at the top level. So they'll be looking for top four. Frankfurt will be looking for top four, and of course they've qualified for the Champions League. Dortmund are the real question mark, and they're always the real question mark. Niko Kovac has got his feet under the table there. Can he make them as fit as he needs to? Because he demands top fitness, and he'll have had he'll have had the Club World Cup, but he'll have had a pre-season to try and get them as fit as they need to be. Guirassy is on fire, top scorer in the Champions League, joint top scorer in the Club World Cup, did really well in the Bundesliga. They've got a goal scorer. That's fine. They've kept Kobel. They've got one of the best goalkeepers around. So those bits are sorted. It's all the bits in the middle that are the issue. Nico Schlotterbeck should be back soon from injury. He's a really important player at centre-back. It's just whether they can get any consistency. For me, they're by far the team that has the most potential to push Bayern, I think.
Look, without getting too personal, I had some personal links to Dortmund back in the day. My first wife, her mum, lived in the grounds of that huge public park which contains the stadium for Dortmund. And so I saw a lot of Dortmund for a couple of years whenever we were over there. And of course, it's a magnificent stadium and brilliant atmosphere, yellow wall and all the rest of it. But of course, I'm biased now because I think they are the second biggest club in Germany, particularly as the real second biggest club in Germany is currently loitering in the second tier. Hello, Schalke. But maybe that's an image that's really should have been confined to history, because that's decades ago. And yet something still tells me that they are a sleeping giant, Dortmund. And mismanagement and poor choices of players and managers over the past decade have just left them hobbled.
What it is, Danny, I believe, and look, they were in a Champions League final a couple of seasons ago.
Absolutely.
And the season before that, they were on the edge of winning the league and blew it on the final day. My issue with them in recent years, post-Klopp really, everything's done on emotion. They make decisions that no other big club would make. And the most recent of those is hiring Nuri Sahin as coach at the start of last season. Yeah. Because there's just no other big club that would have hired him, because he had almost no senior coaching experience. Yes, he'd been at Antalyaspor for a couple of years, and fine. That was some experience in the Turkish Super League. But there's no other big club that would have said he's the man for us. It was purely because he knew the club, in inverted commas, and he was a fan favourite, but just not good enough. And in the end, the players didn't buy into what he was trying to do. It was a total failure. And quite frankly, it was a miracle that Kovac got them into the Champions League, because I think they won 7 of the last 8 and just about managed to sneak in. So they keep doing things like this. They keep making emotional decisions. When they got rid of Marco Rosa after a year, I think that was basically because he wasn't a Dortmund guy and they didn't think he really got Dortmund. But they should have kept him. It's a strange football club.
The ghost of Nuri Sahin haunts one of the stories we'll do in the last hour of today's edition of Trans Europe Express, which you're listening to with me, Danny Kelly, and him, Kevin Hatchard. We have got a ton of stuff to get through in the final 60 minutes, including we'll be starting with a kind of mystery story for you. Whatever happened to Joao Felix?
The Ryder Cup. Unique, euphoric, unanimously loved. Here's the history and some of the key numbers behind the contest that grips the world of golf and beyond like no other. The first edition was held in 1927, where a Great Britain team arrived by boat to play in Massachusetts at the Worcester Country Club. Originally, the competition comprised of 4 foursomes and 8 singles, with 4 balls not introduced until 1963. In the first 22 editions, when it was just Brits and Irish against the US, America only lost 3. So, in 1979, in came the rest of Europe, including the future 5-time Ryder Cup winner, Seve Ballesteros. Since Team Europe was established, the head-to-head reads Europe 13, USA 9. Home advantage is a big deal. Europe's last away win was the miracle at Medina in 2012, and America hasn't won on European soil since '93 at the Belfry. It's accepted that both teams tailor their home courses to suit their own players. For example, in Paris in 2018, Thomas Bjorn asked for the rough to be kept extra long beyond the green to target the big booming American drives. 10 years earlier, Paul Azinger did the opposite, and the Valhalla rough was trimmed right down. On both occasions, the home side were resounding winners. So what about the money? The most recent Ryder Cup in Rome drew in a record 271,000 spectators and boosted the Italian economy by €262 million. In the US, the PGA America TV deal with NBC is worth $440 million. But no Ryder Cup revenue has ever gone directly to individual players. That's until now. In 2025, for the first time ever, the US team will each receive a fee for playing in New York. Of course,
Yeah, welcome back to the third and final hour of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me, I'm delighted to say, there in the studio in London is Kevin Hatchard. We've had 2 hours absolutely packed with stuff, including Kevin's great soliloquy at the top of the show about Son Heung-min. And of course, we've got plenty more to fit into this last 60 minutes. We'll be hearing from the author of a new book about Italian football in the 80s and 90s. Delicious, isn't it? The very thought of Italian football in the 80s and 90s. For those of you who are old enough to remember that, we'll have all the latest from the European club qualifiers, including a really, really important defeat for Besiktas that could have long-term consequences. We'll be talking, Kevin will take you around the leagues as well. We'll hear about yet another big transfer into Chelsea, and they've even started in some of these countries, Super Cups and Community Shields in Holland, the Netherlands and Portugal. And of course we'll be, they're well into the season already in Belgium. Welcome one, welcome all. You're listening to Trans Europe Express on talkSPORT. So, Kevin, it's a bit like a mystery, whatever happened to baby Jane. Now, look, we're talking about a player who 2 different clubs have seen fit in the last year to spend £40 million, euros, riads, whatever it is, on. But we're going to do a section called Whatever Happened to Joao Felix. And I want to start, because we talked about him a lot before the show began, I want to start with your recollections of him as a youth player, which you remember very distinctly.
Yeah, so I used to be a commentator on the UEFA Youth League, which is basically the under-19s version of the Champions League. And I was doing Benfica and did all my stickers and was excited to see some of these players. And one of them was Joao Felix, and this was back in 2016. And I was absolutely blown away. He was this willowy slip of a guy, but his touch was amazing, the movement, finishing. And that season in the Youth League, he was absolutely brilliant. He was phenomenal that season for them. And once he broke through to the first team under Bruno Lage, who was at one stage the Wolves boss, and he's now in his second spell as the senior coach of Benfica, he took it on a step. So scored a Europa League hat-trick against Eintracht Frankfurt. He was only 19. Still the youngest player ever to achieve that. He became the youngest player to score for Benfica in a derby against Sporting. And that season he got 20 goals in all. Goal on the final day to help Benfica clinch the title. Won the Golden Boy Award in 2019. And you thought, wow, this kid that I saw in the Youth League is going to be absolutely brilliant. And a little bit of ego gets in there because you think, oh, I spotted Joao Felix. Well, anybody could have spotted him. Of course. Absolutely anybody would have spotted him. And
even
then,
Tim Vickery could have seen him, yeah.
And Tim would have been right on it. First nanosecond, he'd have been right on it. But then what we have with him is the first situation where modern football catches up with him. And I'm going to explain that as we go through. But yeah, Atletico Madrid, who were, held the purse strings pretty tightly up until that point, suddenly splurged €126 million on him in 2019. It was
astonishing, that transfer.
It really was.
We're all used to clubs spending big money and occasionally something takes your breath away. But that was extraordinary, not just because of Atletico Madrid, but the fee seemed... unless they'd got into their head that they were signing the next Lionel Messi, which I think they did.
I think they did. I think the board at the time, above Simeone, because I don't think Simeone overly pushed for this. It wasn't his decision. It was a board decision to spend this money, and they were very, very convinced that he was going to be an absolute superstar. Now, there's a bit of revisionism when people look back at his time at Atletico. It was a little bit like what happens with Mario Götze when people think of his time at Bayern. Because, yes, he had a couple of injury problems in the first season. He struggled a bit. But he wins La Liga in his second season. And in the third season, he's Atleti's player of the season. But by 3 years in, him and Simeone rubbing each other up the wrong way had got too much to bear. And so they were looking for a way out. And he went to Chelsea. And he was sent off at his chat. Then we have the second spell of modern football kind of being weird with him and catching up with him, because he goes to a Chelsea team that doesn't really need him. He was part of that nightmare season under Graham Potter, Frank Lampard. They'd got rid of Tuchel before that. Just chaos under the new owners. And then he goes back to Atletico. Now, it's important here, I think, to reference some quotes this week from Saúl Ñíguez, his former teammate, because Saúl said, Joao has all the qualities to be an incredible player, but as good as you are, if you don't work, it's not enough. Talent without effort. Yeah, he said talent without effort is worthless. It's a team game. A lot of us tried to help him, but if you don't want it, what can you do? And that is always the allegation that's sent in his direction, that he doesn't have the desire, he doesn't have the work rate, he's not willing to do what Simeone wanted, and that's why Simeone wanted to get rid of him.
I don't think that situation in his various spells at Atletico was helped by the fact that the club took him back at a time when he was at a low point. And people have got to take responsibility for their own actions, Kevin.
Yeah.
Then Joao Felix set up on a campaign of touting himself to Barcelona.
That's utterly ridiculous. And he got the move he wanted in the end, but he completely alienated everybody at Atletico in doing so. He kept talking about how it was his dream move, how he really wanted to play for Barcelona. And so Atleti just wanted to get him gone by this stage. He went to Barcelona on loan, did fine, had some good performances, scored some goals, played 30 league games in the end, but they couldn't afford to keep him, and I don't think they would have kept him anyway. And so suddenly, this other reflection of modern football, he ends up going back to Chelsea as an accounting wheeze because they needed a make weight to sell Conor Gallagher to Atletico. And so Joao Felix eventually goes the other way. Chelsea never really had a space for him. He ended up duffing up teams in the Conference League. He got the move to Milan. They were in flux. They'd had a coaching change. They were all over the place. Couldn't make any kind of impact there. And then I thought, this summer, okay, maybe he can go back to Benfica. And he talked really positively about going back to Benfica. He could hook up with Bruno Lage again, who's the coach who's got the most out of him. He could be back in a familiar environment. He could be the main guy in the team. All makes sense. And then Benfica can't match what Al Nassr can pay, and he's ended up going to Al Nassr on a 2-year contract. So again, it's just another stopping point.
This lad is only 25 years of age.
Yeah.
He should be heading into the best years of his football career. But we can probably name 6-10 examples of really talented players who never found a proper home for whatever reason, sometimes their own responsibility, sometimes bad choices, sometimes clubs that weren't doing the right thing by them. But it strikes me that Joao Felix has got to get this move has got to work for him, even if he's only goes to Saudi Arabia for 1 or 2 years and rehabilitates himself, because otherwise he's in danger of becoming a leaf in the wind.
Yeah, I think, one of my favourite football writers, actually, Jack Lang, came up with a brilliant line for him. He called Joao Felix football's Rorschach test, which is basically everybody who looks at him has a different view, see a different thing in him. He's a kind of picture, ever-shifting picture. And I might see a brilliant player, the next person might see a complete waster, the next person might see something completely different. He's just such an anomaly. But I'll always maintain, even if he never plays another game, that there was an entertainer there, there was a brilliant footballer there, there was just an undeniable talent there who was maybe born in the wrong era. Because I just wonder if he'd have actually not been in such a regimented era, if he had played for a club where it was all a bit more fast and loose and he had been indulged a bit, maybe like Jadon Sancho, then he could have been one of the world's top stars. Because you know how much I think Jadon Sancho's an amazing player, and I put him in the same category.
No, he's another one. Yeah, absolutely. Who must get the next move in his career, and maybe it's back to his old stamping grounds at Dortmund if that can be done financially. He has to get that right, otherwise Jadon will go from being on the cusp of being an England regular to being, as I say, I'm going to use the phrase again, a leaf in the wind.
Yeah, you want players. I always think about this. I took my daughter, she was 8 at the time. I took her to see England against USA. I think it was Wayne Rooney's last game. Jadon Sancho was on the pitch and he did a trick and her jaw dropped, and there was this gasp around us. And I know that might not win you a game, but it's supposed to be fun and it's supposed to be entertainment. And I just think players like Joao Felix will come up with some random body swerve or just some moment. Players like Sancho will do a trick and beat somebody. There's got to be a place for them in the game somewhere. There just has to be.
Last question about him, because presumably he will be the big dog where he's going in Saudi.
Well, Ronaldo's there, so he might be a smaller dog.
What's his best position, Kevin?
I think as a 10. I think as a kind of second striker who can roam a bit and kind of get into what he was really good at back in that Benfica Youth League team. And I know it's youth football, I know it's under 19.
Sure.
But he had this really great instinct of when to dart into the box and be in the right place at the right time. He actually did score some scruffy goals. Like he had those strikers' instincts, but it's just all been a bit lost. But there's still a player in there. I just hope it emerges. I really do.
Sure, because there's nothing, in football, the two things that annoy me most are obviously injuries to talented people because it's such a waste, and then wasting talent for whatever sets of reasons. And sometimes it is the player's fault. I don't know about Joao Felix. I don't know his curve, his story arc well enough to say that. What I do know now, he's been through a lot of clubs and nobody's quite found the play, except for those second and third year, perhaps in Atletico, where he was doing what you thought he would do when he was a kid. But he's still got time, but this is a huge move for him. Thank you very much indeed. Next, we'll be joined by the author of a new book about Italian football in the 80s and 90s. I can't wait. Welcome back, everybody, to Trans-Europe Express, where we're motoring through this final hour with me, Danny Kelly, and him, Kevin Hatchard, but not alone. We've got a new voice for you now as well. In fact, we should have been playing the theme music from Football Italia, the programme that dominated on Channel 4, that dominated people's view of continental football, it changed the world. Because Italian football was so powerful in the 80s and 90s. Well, Dominic Hoffman football writer about lots of things actually, has written a new book on Italian football in the 80s and 90s. It's called Veni Vidi Vici. For those of you, unlike me, who failed their Latin O level, it means they came, they saw, and they conquered. And certainly Italian football was just huge back in those decades. Good evening, Dominic. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on your show. Very glad to be here.
We're really, really glad to have you on the show. I think you, first of all, I mean, you can explain why you decided to write the book, but you need to do that against the background of explaining to the millions of teenagers who listen to this program just how huge Italian football was in the 80s and 90s, where it occupied a position, if I might be so bold, that's now occupied by the Premier League.
Yes, no, definitely. The inspiration was, I mean, like a lot of my generation, I fell in love with Italian football, starting with Italia 90. So that was a very iconic World Cup for a lot of us. It was the perfect World Cup for me. I was at university. I could sit and watch every game. And it had, England getting to the semi-finals. You had Republic of Ireland doing well. And these amazing futuristic stadia, these great graphics, Des Lynam, Nessun Dorma, everybody will remember those who were present at that World Cup. And that got a love for Italy. And then what obviously happened after that was, if you recall, English football had been the dominant place until the mid-80s and the Heysel disaster. Then after the Heysel disaster, there was a bit of a vacuum because English teams were banned from Europe for a while. And what happened was Italian teams rose to the fore, and then we had Channel 4 come and show because Paul Gascoigne, who had been so good at Italia 90, he went to Lazio. And so what Channel 4 decided to do was, because of the interest in England of watching how Gascoigne did over there, they decided to cover Italian football. And it was like having the veil lifted off our eyes for many of us. British football was kind of stagnating at that time. There was hooliganism. There'd been the Bradford Fire. There'd been Hillsborough.
Absolutely.
It wasn't the happiest place to watch football. And then suddenly on Channel 4, we could watch all the world's best players playing in Italy. And as you say, it was the dominant league at the time, probably even more dominant than Premier League is now. Literally, and this is what inspired in part the book, was 10 of the teams in Italy had got to European finals over that period. They ruled everything. And it wasn't just the usual thing that you think of as Inter, Juve, Milan, and Napoli. There were teams like Sampdoria, there were teams like Parma, Lazio, Fiorentina, all getting to European finals.
Dominic, so I was there at Wembley when Sampdoria lost to Barcelona in the Champions League final. People, Sampdoria are now, almost not lost to history. That's not fair. But any Italian side that you met in this period of time was going to give you a problem because they were stuffed to the gunnels with tough, battle-hardened Italian professionals, and then usually three absolutely brilliant overseas players, the cream of world footballers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking over like an 11 or 12 season period in the book. And if you look at the Ballon d'Ors, for example, 8 of the Ballon d'Ors of those 12 went to players playing in Italy. You had the Van Bastens, you had Baggio, you had Weah, you had Ronaldo, the real Ronaldo, Zidane. I mean, anybody who was anybody was playing in Italy at that time. So they were so dominant. And yeah, like you say, when it got to the European finals, the best example probably is actually the UEFA Cup. The UEFA Cup, in the 11 finals, 8 of them were won by Italian teams in that period, which just shows the breadth. Because it wasn't just the Milans. They were busy winning the Champions League, but you had all these other teams like Torino getting to finals, Roma. There was only one UEFA Cup final over those 11 seasons that didn't even have an Italian team in it. They were just completely dominated everything. And it was all because of the money that they had. If you think about, it's probably kicked off by Berlusconi at Milan. He was the first one who started spending big. And then it became like an arms race between all of the teams of who could spend the most. And they all had rich owners who were quite happy to throw money around, and they could get at least 3 foreign players. But as you say, it wasn't just the foreign players. The Italian players were fantastic as well. If you think of Italy, I mean, they got to the 94 World Cup final. They were penalties away from winning. And that amazing defense they had of Baresi, Maldini, Tassotti, Costa Curta. I mean, it wasn't just foreign players. The Italian players were fantastic as well. But yeah, literally anybody was playing in that league at the time.
It was that depth as well, wasn't it? That competition, because you think of Sven-Göran Eriksson's incredible Lazio team, for example. It wasn't just Juventus and Milan every year. There were those challenges from elsewhere, Inter and Lazio and other teams. And even outside of them, you think of some of the players who played for Fiorentina. You think of Batistuta, guys like that. So you had, I even remember the Foggia team with Kolivanov and players like that. You remember that they had 3 players up front who were absolutely incredible. That Parma team you've already mentioned, everybody of a certain age remembers the kit, right? And remembers Brolin and remembers Asprilla.
Parmalat.
Incredible, that kit. So, you think of that. It was sprinkled all around the league rather than, say, in Germany, what we have now, which is Bayern obviously dominate, and there are a few good players outside of that, but Bayern have the majority. That just wasn't the case in Italy, was it?
Yeah, that was one of the things that attracted me to write the book, because it allowed me to write about so many different teams. Yeah, if you think about Spain recently, Spain's been very dominant, but a lot of it has been Real Madrid and Barcelona, really, between the two of them. And as you say, it was spread out. I think Parma was probably one of the best examples to use, because before the 1990s, they'd never even been in Serie A. And then they literally come up and they start getting to UEFA Cup finals. They start winning finals. This was a team, it's the equivalent of someone like Plymouth next season getting promoted to the Premiership and then immediately getting into Europe and starting to win European finals. That just shows, yes, they were backed by Parmalat and they had money, but to go from a team that had never even been in the top division to starting to play in European finals in a couple of years just shows the breadth that they had and the breadth of talent that was available to them.
I went to the World Cup in 1990. I was there for that. I think probably the most exciting but least football technical game of the entire tournament, England and the Republic of Ireland in Cagliari, which I'm sure football experts would have turned their eyes away from the pitch. But I really had a thoroughly brilliant time in the lightning storm. The game wouldn't be played nowadays. I also had an experience that I must give back to you, Dominic. I went to the Milan derby, and it was technically a home game for Milan, and so the Inter fans had only one quarter of the ground behind one of the goals. And as the teams came out, the noise, as you would expect, was absolutely cacophonous. And the Inter fans unveiled from the third tier up in the San Siro to the pitch level the biggest tifo I've ever seen. And it was essentially just blue and black stripes with a couple of badges on it. I thought, that's brilliant. But the design's a bit not all that great, is it? And all the way down, every now and then, there were portholes about the size of a human head, maybe a bit bigger, through which, as the Milan team took the pitch, the Inter ultras put their backsides. Their naked backsides were pushed through the tifo to express their excitement of the arrival of their immediate opponents and rivals. It was brilliant. It was nuts. I'd never seen anything like it in England. Of course I hadn't. But the excitement of Italian football that time was just extraordinary. I want to talk to me about the AC Milan team with the Dutch trio in it. I know Inter tried the same trick with the great German players. I'm of an opinion that that AC team of the early 90s is maybe the Barcelona team of the tiki-taka of 2011-12, that sort of time. But I think it's the best club side I've seen.
Yeah, and they like Barcelona, they changed the way football was played. If you remember, what it was Berlusconi came, and what he did was bring in Arrigo Sacchi as a manager. Now, Sacchi had only managed Parma in Serie B, but what happened is they beat Milan a couple of times in the cup, and that's what got him the job. And he was under a lot of pressure at first because he had a lot of money to spend, and they weren't sure if he was going to do it correctly. But he ended up producing this incredible team that kind of invented pressing. He had these rules where he would insist that the defense and attack could only be a certain distance apart. He was the one who always said, like, let's go forward, let's press. He was very into playing the ball very quickly from back to front. And he kind of actually revolutionized European football at the time. Now, yes, he had an amazing team. He had one of the strongest defenses we were talking about earlier, that Baresi, Maldini,
amazing.
Tassotti. It was literally the Italian defense as well. They were so good, they just plugged them into there. So they had that. And then they got in the 3 Dutch players. So you had Gullit, first of all, who was absolutely amazing midfielder, who could pop up and score at any time, kind of like a Frank Lampard of his day, but even better header of the ball. And then you had Van Basten, who was just a born goal scorer. If anybody doesn't know Van Basten, just watch some of the highlights of his goals for both Ajax, which is where he's playing before, and AC Milan. And it was a very sad story of Van Basten. I mean, he goes through a lot of injury problems and ends up having to retire at AC Milan. But when he was on fire, he was unstoppable and scored some incredible goals. And then you had Frank Rijkaard as well. And so Saki took these, put them all together, and then made this incredible team where they really made their mark when they were in one of the European Cup semi-finals, and they thrashed a really good Real Madrid side 5-1 in the semi-final. And that put them on notice to the whole of Europe, like this was a seriously good team. And then they played against, in the final against Barcelona, and that was Johan Cruyff's dream team. And again, absolutely hammered them 4-0. One of the best
it was
final
murder.
performances.
They could have called the Carabinieri because it was pure murder.
Yeah. And that was a really, really good Johan Cruyff managed Barcelona team. So, yeah, they were definitely revolutionary. They were definitely an incredible team at that time that won a couple of, actually won 3 Champions Leagues in that day. So, yeah, they definitely revolutionized football.
I'm glad you said that. Because, Dominic, when you get to, I'm not a teenager anymore, you start to think maybe your mind is building these things up too much in the past. But I know that we're a great, great team. Kevin?
For completists, I've remembered those Foggia players, by the way. Beppe Signori, who went on to do very well after that. Roberto Rambaudi and Francesco Baiano. But there we go. That's just one for the Foggia fans. We've just been talking about Joao Felix and Jadon Sancho. And I made the point that I wonder if they were in a different era, whether they'd have excelled even more. And I think of players like Robbie Baggio. I think about Alex Del Piero. These were 10s who were so exciting and kind of floated about doing damage everywhere they went. And it was a league for that, wasn't it? There were players like Totti later who were just given that platform to go and do their thing, right?
Yeah. Yes, the Italians have always kind of had that that player that they call a kind of creative player just behind the attack. Baggio is a fantastic example of that. Del Piero, Totti, as you say. And they were kind of more willing to do that than a lot of other teams. If you think about the English team, that wasn't really the way the English played. They had 2 up front and a midfield. But the Italians were very into their kind of fantasista player. Baggio, to me, was still my favourite of that era. I think he was one of the best players ever. It always sickens me that everybody remembers him for the '94 World Cup and talks about his penalty miss and forgets about the fact that he kind of single-handedly dragged Italy to that World Cup final. So he is my personal favourite. But yeah, Italian sides were more embracing of that kind of player. They tolerated somebody who maybe didn't work 100%, but could produce a moment of magic to just completely change a game. So yeah, they were different to many European sides in that respect, and that also, as you say, made it very attractive to watch.
And the thing is, Dominic, we of course were still trapped in the little England mentality. The Italian football was defensive, catenaccio, all the rest of that, and the TV coverage on Channel 4 showed that was all a thing in the past, even more so now, of course. And so I'm glad that you've had a chance to bring us back to the amazing football that was played in Italy in the 80s and 90s when their teams dominated the world. The book is called Veni Vidi Vici. Dominic Hoffman is the name you're looking out for. And our thanks, Dominic, for joining us here on Trans-Europe Express.
10k for Coldplay.
Yeah, time is now running out to enter our huge prize draw to win 10 grand and a VIP night out at Coldplay at Wembley Stadium. That's right, we're giving you the chance to win 6 tickets in a private box for you and your mates on August the 22nd with full hospitality, and we're chucking in that 10 grand spending money completely tax-free. Now, it all ends tomorrow night, so here's how to enter. It's 18 plus. It's the UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 8338. That's 8338. By the 4th of August at 11 p.m. That's tomorrow, 11 p.m. And you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must, of course, have the bill payer's permission. Or you can post your name and address to Coldplay Competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 7th of August. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT Talk and the Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's are at talksport.com. So, Kevin, as we'll hear, we're in the last section of tonight's show in a few minutes' time. The football leagues are starting to gear up. Well, we've seen that the Football League has started in England, for instance, just below the Premier League level, or certainly League One and League Two are up and running. Other leagues are starting to wake up and stretch themselves. And the European the qualifiers for the Champions League, the Europa League and the Conference League are in full swing. I want to look at a few of those results, some involving the Scottish teams. But first, I guess the biggest match so far in these qualifiers, and certainly Andy Brassell was very excited by it, is Besiktas under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer taking on Shakhtar. And of course, we all know the terrible situation that surrounded Shakhtar for the past 2 years of the illegal war that Russia have inflicted on the people of Ukraine. Now, Shakhtar won on aggregate. Brilliant for them. Well done to them. But this is a terrible, terrible result for Besiktas. And we've been talking about Turkish football, and it's how it's starting to spend big money. Besiktas are a huge club. They can't afford to be going out like this.
Yeah, and I think it really highlights the problems that they have on and off the pitch. Because not only were they beaten by Shakhtar Donetsk, they were completely outclassed by them. Now, Shakhtar, as you quite rightly say, have had just the most unimaginable circumstances to have to try and deal with, and have dealt with them incredibly well when you think how they've competed in Europe in the last couple of years. But it was the fact that it was clear daylight between the two teams, and Arda Turan, who is the Shakhtar coach, who of course was an excellent player in his day. Now, he knew Besiktas well from his time at Eyüpspor. And it was the fact that he was able to negate Besiktas so easily that I think frustrated people, because there's a general feeling that if you can negate Rafa Silva and you can stop them playing through the middle, it's very difficult for Besiktas to try and create anything, because the area where they're really weak is out wide. Milot Rashica is a shadow of the player that he was when he was in Germany, and even then he could be a bit hit and miss. They just don't have that quality in wide areas. So you've got Tammy Abraham, for example, waiting for service, and it just doesn't arrive. So the light was shone on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer after the defeat, and he was asked about his future, and he insisted, I'm the right man to take the team forward. We need stability. We've had all these changes at board level, at coach level. And he's right. If you look at Fernando Santos, the former Portugal boss, only lasted a few months. Gio van Bronckhorst was only there a few months. They've had coaches come and go. So Solskjaer said, I'm staying. Then there were these reports recently that Nuri Sahin, who we mentioned earlier after an awful spell at Dortmund, was ready to step in if they decided to get rid of Solskjaer. The club this morning came out and addressed that specific rumour and said it was completely baseless. But what's happening is, and I spoke to a journalist this morning who covers Besiktas really, really closely, and his feeling was that this has been coming for some time, and poor old Solskjaer has ended up being the lightning rod for the fans' frustration. Because what they're really angry about is the board, and they're really angry about the finances, and they're really angry about the transfer policy, because time and time again, too short-term, too agent-led, too many cheap fixes that aren't going to sort anything in the long term. And there have been players who've been brought in for fair chunks of cash that just haven't been playing. And that's caused frustration as well. There have been financial issues in the sense that there was a bank loan that was restructured, and this journalist suggested to me that what had happened was the currency was changed to Turkish lira. And at the time, that was seen as a really positive move because they'd restructured the loan. It looked like it was going to be really easily payable. But because of changes to the Turkish economy, that's now a much more difficult loan to service. And so a lot of it is going on interest payments. So you've got a club that has a squad that's not fit for purpose, a club that then can't really find the money to fix that, and you've got a manager that's kind of stuck with it, trying to batten down the hatches and fight his way through.
Okay, so they have to play a qualifier to get into the Conference League, a competition they could win, Besiktas. Let's not kid ourselves. And they will play St Patrick's Athletic out of Dublin from here in the Republic of Ireland. That in itself is a remarkable story. St Pat's had beaten the team they were playing against, Kalju of Estonia, 1-0 in Dublin. Not a great result, really, because Kalju had 9 men for large chunks of the game. They then go to Estonia, where Julie fall 2-0 behind on the night. So in the 91st minute of the game, they're going out, St Patrick's. But in the 91st minute, Joe Redmond gets an equaliser. It looks like the game's going to go to extra time because away goals don't count double anymore, as you well know. Up pops Jake Mulroney in the 94th minute, or the 4th minute of added on time, to get a winner, a 3-2 winner for the Irish team. Very, very unlikely circumstances, particularly as Irish teams do not do well away from home. That is fair to say. So it's fantastic win for St Patrick's when they will play Besiktas next. Now, the gulf in class here between the two teams should be enormous. But Besiktas are so odd, we'll see how that one goes. I want to talk about two Scottish teams, Kevin, while we still have a little bit of time. Rangers, it looked like a terribly difficult draw when they drew Panathinaikos. They got through, but it was a difficult tie for them.
Yeah, they were really shaky in the opening exchanges of that second leg. They ended up drawing 1-1 and they went through 3-1 on aggregate, but Jack Butland was brilliant. Made some superb saves. Facundo Pellistri, formerly in Manchester United, blazed a brilliant chance over from close range. And what that came from was Rangers bringing the ball out from the back. Now, we know that Russell Martin has his way of playing. I respect the fact that he sticks by it because you don't want somebody who's going to chop and change all the time. But we know the truth of it. It's going to be frustrating because Rangers are going to have to get used to it. The fans are going to have to get used to it. They're going to give the ball up a lot in their own defensive third. That's just how his football works to start with until he can get them beating the press and consistently playing through. So they then conceded a goal to make it 2-1 early in the second half, Filip Juricic with a header. But JD Gassama, who'd scored in the first leg, comes on as a sub, thumps in an equaliser. Brilliant finish. It hit it so well. And that came just after the equaliser. I think that goal doesn't go in and they're under the cosh for a bit longer. I think Panathinaikos maybe turn that around. So Rangers have now got Victoria Pilsenia. They had their own comeback. They were 1-0 down from the first leg against Servette, but they went to Switzerland and they won 3-1. Now, even though they're a Czech team, Pilsenia are dangerous. They've had a lot of European experience in the last few years. They've, played against some pretty good teams. So Rangers can't afford to be off it. And what I thought was interesting was just how extreme Russell Martin was in his criticism of some of the players after the game at the weekend. Like, furious with the way some of them have played. So be really interested to see how they do against Pilsenia. That's a tough tie.
Another Scottish team who were involved were Hibs. They went out to Midtjylland, and I guess that's a reflection of two kind of equally matched leagues. They did okay, Hibernian, but that could have gone either way. But it's another, I don't know how to say this for Scottish football. It's another season where they're not going to gather up particularly lots and lots of points except for the big Glasgow Giants.
Yeah, I think this comes down to partially funding because Midtjylland have done really, really well at developing young talent. And so they're really good at recruiting, really good at selling it on, very data-driven. And they've won things. You know, they've been a real force in Danish football. They played in the Champions League. They've racked up money that way. But this was close. This was really close. It was 0-0 on the night at Easter Road. It was 1-1 on aggregate. But then early in extra time, Dario Osorio for Michelin hits an absolute rocket. It's a brilliant goal. But then Hibs equalised just before half-time and extra time. But the goal that wins it for Michelin is in the 119th minute, and it's an overhead kick from Junior Brumado. It's a wonderful goal to send Hibs out. But their coach, David Gray, talked about it afterwards, said he was obviously devastated to go out, but he was so proud of the way his team had played. And they could still stay in Europe, but they've got Partizan in the Conference League. Now, Partizan are a big name, obviously, from Belgrade, but they lost to AEK Larnaca in the UEL qualifiers, so they're not unbeatable. There's a chance there for Hibernian.
Listen, thank you for that, Kevin. As I said, now as we head towards the finishing line of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express, all over Europe, that sound you're hearing of knuckles cracking and bones creaking is the leagues kicking back into action, sometimes with Super Cups and Charity Shields and community matches and all the rest of it, sometimes with actual football. Kevin will bring you the latest on all of those in just a few seconds' time here on Trans-Europe Express. Welcome back to the final section of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express, which I hope you've enjoyed listening to as much as we enjoyed doing it, in which case you've had, I often say, a blast. Kevin Hatchell is still very much here with us, and he's been watching with great interest the coming out of hibernation of leagues all over Europe. Of course, there have been one or two that play in the summer, including here in the Republic of Ireland. You can hear my latest postcard from Ireland on H&J tomorrow about 2:30. I've got some amazing stories for you, including one about a player who joined a club, made his debut, got beat 3-0, got yellow carded and was sacked within 3 days for not living up to the club's ethical standards. I've got that story for you tomorrow. Meanwhile, Kevin, as I say, the winter leagues are starting to get back into action, including the Netherlands.
Yes, it's like we're taking tortoises out of the box after a couple of months.
Very Blue Peter, that, what you just said.
PSV won the Johan Cruyff Shield which is their version of the Community Shield, but didn't have it all their own way, actually. So they played go-ahead Eagles, who won the Dutch Cup last season, but they've lost their coach, Paul Simoni, to Wolfsburg. But they led for a big chunk of this. Mati Surai scored 10 minutes before half-time with their first effort on target. And PSV had to wait until 12 minutes to go to get the equaliser. Ivan Perisic, 306 years old, was able to raid down the left. He's still so good, Danny.
Yeah,
honestly, he's still so good. Broke down the left-hand side, got the cross in, and it was an own goal. The defender stretching at the near post, flicking it home. And then Serginho Dest scored a brilliant winner, actually. Came in off the right-hand side, thumped it into the far corner with his left foot with 6 minutes to go. Now, why this is significant, I think, is when you think of the players that PSV have lost. I mentioned Perisic out wide, but they've lost Noah Lang to Napoli. I'm fascinated to see how that works, by the way, because that's emotion upon emotion. Bakayoko's gone to Leipzig. Luke de Jong has gone as well. Now, he scored buckets of goals for them, and he's just joined Porto. And the fascinating thing about that was he was unveiled by Porto as part of their team announcement. Nobody knew he was joining. They'd kept it under wraps. Not a whisper. No, here we go, nothing. Nobody knew he was going. He was a free agent, but he just appeared at the stadium as they had their kind of team announcement. So he's gone to Porto. So they've made some signings, but they've got some work still to do, I think. They've signed Van Bommel's son, Ruben, so I'll be interested to see how he does. But yeah, PSV with a good start to the season.
We should talk as well about another player that Chelsea, inevitably Chelsea, have bought, Joao Felix, from the Dutch league.
Yeah, I think this is a good pickup. He's been linked with the Premier League for quite some time, still very, very young, but he's packed a lot in. He's played a lot of games for Ajax, and he's somebody that can play left back but can play centre back as well. He's comfortable in possession. I think that really fits what Maresca wants to do. He's basically going to stop them driving Cucurella into the ground because he just seems to play game after game after game. So I think Joao Felix will really help that because he can cover those positions. He's got things to work on. He'll have to develop, but so far so good. So I think it's a smart move by Chelsea.
Let's then go on to Belgium, where I think they're into the third round of matches, are they?
Into the second. So Anderlecht, the only team who've got a 100% record. They won 2-0 at Cercle Brugge. Union Saint-Gilloise, they drew on match day 1, but they won 5-0 against Leuven. But quite an eye-catching result because Club Brugge, they lost 2-1 at Mechelen, so they've lost a bit of early ground in the opening weeks in Belgium.
Yeah, Union, of course, finally champions last season. Portugal has started as well. They've had their Super Cup.
They did, and Sporting started life without Victor Gyökeres with the defeat. They lost 1-0 to Benfica, and it was Vangelis Pavlidis, who so consistent for Benfica, such a regular scorer. He got the only goal of the game. Rui Silva in goal, probably could have done a bit better with it. But the interesting thing was how they replaced Gyökeres. Konrad Harder is the one who's trying to push for that job to replace him, but he didn't have his best game. They had a goal ruled out and he was offside in the build-up, so yeah, he struggled in that one. So good win that for Benfica, because they got a long time without beating Sporting. I think it had been 7 in a row without victory against them, so that's an early flag in the sand.
And Kevin, because we love when you come on and replace Andy, you've got I've got given you 4 whole minutes here to talk about one of the great football leagues of Europe, the second tier, Bundesliga 2 in Deutschland.
Well, I was told I'd have the full 3 hours, so I'm a little disappointed about that. 4 minutes I'll have to do. Yes.
Don't listen to that producer. He tells lies.
Bundesliga 2 is back. It is honestly one of the craziest leagues in the world. It's so unpredictable. You look at a Bundesliga 2 table with 10 match days to go, and I'll show you a whole league where everybody could go up and everybody could go down. So we started with Schalke against Hertha. Massive game, attendance of over 62,000.
There you go.
I mean, just unbelievable. It was Miro Muslic's first league game in charge because he was at Plymouth previously, and it was a 2-1 win for Schalke. Loris Karius was in goal for Schalke, by the way. Liverpool fans might be interested to know. But they are not top, Schalke. Arminia Bielefeld are top. They won 5-1 against Fortuna Düsseldorf, even though they went down a goal early on. But Düsseldorf had a man sent off and Arminia thrashed them. Now, the reason that's significant is because Arminia only won promotion last season. And last season, they got all the way to the final of the German Cup. And they beat Bayer Leverkusen in the semi-final. So they're a club really on the up. But they've done that classic thing of being a top-level club that went down to the third tier. And they've started bouncing back. So I'm really glad to see them going well. Bochum went down last season under Dieter Hecking, veteran coach. Loads of talk this summer about they've done loads of good transfer business. They've got rid of all the dead woods, brought in loads of great young players. Lost the first game 4-1 at Darmstadt. Got absolutely hammered. Isaac Lidberg scored a hat-trick for the hosts. And it is tough. I mean, Bochum have had to really readjust. A lot of their leaders have gone. Guys like Anthony Luzia, the Frenchman, who was so important for them in midfield, he's gone. And it isn't easy. You look at Hamburg, how long it's taken them. They've only just gone back
hilarity.
Up. Took them
That's
ages.
a hilarity.
I think Schalke are going to have similar problems. It's a really competitive league, and it's really difficult.
But if you're pulling in 60,000 people, I know that people don't pay as much for their tickets in Germany. Your revenue is so strong at that level because there must be teams who are getting 1/5 that crowd, and less.
But that's a great example of that is a team that just got relegated, so Holstein Kiel. Now they've been banging on the door for years, but that's a handball city and that's a sailing city. It's not football city. They're handball teams like Champions League winners. They're like an amazing team. But the football team got promoted a couple of seasons ago, went straight back down. They lost as well. They conceded a 99th minute winner at Paderborn. So that's one of the reasons it's so fascinating, because Elversberg, for example, who were in the third tier not that long ago, they nearly got promoted. They were in the promotion playoff against Heidenheim, and they pushed them all the way. It's one of those leagues, as well, because it's a shorter league. It's a 34-team game season. If you can put something together, and if you can keep your squad together, and if you've got a good style of play, which is what Elversberg had last season, actually you can knock off some of these bigger clubs. So, yeah, really interesting league. Keep an eye on it.
Kevin, I heard one of the club there clearing out the dead wood. I'm going to say that the German for dead wood is Totenherz. There you are. That can't be right, but that's how I speak German. Kevin, it's been a joy and a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you so much indeed, particularly for the work you did at the top of the show when I was having gremlins at this end, but also everything you've done in the meanwhile. In our poll, 67% of you think that Benjamin Sesko's best move is to Newcastle United. I'm back tomorrow on H&J about 2:30 with my postcard from Ireland. Next here on talkSPORT is When the Lights Go Out with Dermot Reeve. Till then, God bless you all and good night.